Why super teams fail. This week, JNT and I have to talk about TL and the downfall of not making worlds. Absolute disaster. We'll get into that and figure out just what went wrong with them. And then, of course, C9 coming alive, looking completely different than what we saw all summer and I guess maybe spring. Like, this is just a completely different team. And then TSM year in review. What a long year it has been for TSM. And of course, we do the postmortems for all the teams once they get eliminated. But TSM has a long list of things. We won't do a huge deep dive, but of course, we have to remind people of just what this year looked like for TSM. Episode 99 of the Clown Fiesta podcast with Blue Jay and JNT 250. JNT, what a weekend.
Absolute bangers. I was listening to Jad's video where he was sort of recapping the weekend, and he
Like
mentioned that,
JLXP?
yeah, but he mentioned over the course of the LCS playoffs, there's been 10 playoff matches. 7 of the 10 have gone to 5 games, and 3 of them have gone 4 games. We've had no 3-0 sweeps. Pretty much every single series, I would say, except for the first series of the playoffs, which was TL versus FlyQuest. Every series has been competitive. I can't think of a series that was as one-sided as the TL FlyQuest one. The only one that you could maybe point to was EG versus C9 last week, and that was a 3-1. And even this week, with the C9 versus 100 Thieves match, that was a pretty close 3-1. I know we always talk about close 3-1s or 3-1 stomps, but that was a 3-1 that was very, very close.
Yeah, and the thing is too is I started thinking about this before the weekend happened. Like, are we gonna start to break a record of like how many games we're gonna see? And then
And
that
we
was
have to have
before the
been.
week. Like, yeah, there's no way. And the thing is, the games are so good. I know, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, and I've been saying it. I don't know since the playoffs started. The LCS is so good right now, and the reason why I'm so excited about it and why I keep saying it is because let's be honest, it hasn't been this way for a couple of years now. And it was like, don't get me wrong, I'm an easy sell. I've always enjoyed the LCS. I have not enjoyed the LCS the way I'm enjoying it now in a long time, and I think most people are in the same boat, and that's why people are so excited, and everyone's just fired up for the LCS, and playoffs are amazing, and I can't say enough about it. So good.
Yeah,
Let's just hop into the first series.
yeah, for sure. We had TL versus CLG on Thursday. What many thought was going to be probably the most one-sided matchup of the weekend turned out to be quite the banger, with CLG taking down Team Liquid, in the first 2 games, somewhat convincingly, going up 2-0. However, TL completing the reverse sweep and kept their lower bracket run alive for the time being.
Which they
And
struggled to do, right? They struggled to reverse sweep a few times, if I remember right. Even going back to, I don't even know, maybe last year even. They've had a lot of series where they start 0-2, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah, I think last year they had both times they played 100 Thieves, they went down 2-0. The one time they managed to complete the reverse sweep, and the other time I think they won 2 and then lost the game 5. I don't remember exactly, but TL for whatever reason seem to be very slow starters as of late, which normally isn't their kind of MO. TL, I felt like in the past when they had their previous rosters, when Jensen was on TL, Doubleth was on TL, Impact was on TL, they were a very aggressive team when it came out early in the best of fives, and you know uh, they didn't really lose a lot of best of fives. I can't even think, did they even lose a single best of five in that 4-year period where they won?
Oh,
Bad.
you're
I
going
I
way too
I
back,
would
too far back
I
for
would
me.
assume they didn't because there was no lower bracket at the time. So I mean, they didn't lose like a domestic best of five for 5 years or for 4 splits. Sorry, what I meant to
Something
say.
I just realized I forgot to mention that again, not on normal setups this week. So if there are audio issues, we're probably aware of them, and we're hoping to be back to regular next week. I forgot to mention that at the start of the show. So if there's audio issues, we apologize. We're doing our best because J&T is a traveling boy, but that should be done soon. Sorry. Back to this conversation. One of the things that I find with just I guess with these playoffs in general, but with CLG specifically, is it's so difficult to predict how they're going to play when they're going to 5 games against Golden Guardians, but also going to 5 games against Team Liquid. Let's be honest, Team Liquid, not the best version of what we think they should be, but there's no way you can compare Team Liquid to Golden Guardians as far as skill level is concerned. And CLG's going to 5 games with both of them. Uh, how do you explain this?
Yeah, I mean, it's just playing to the level of your opponent kind of mind
Yeah.
game, I guess there. But I mean, it was so hilarious how this series started out in game one with TL going for this, pretty, I would say, ambitious top lane dive. At best, probably results in a 1-for-1. However, Dokla outplays the gank, ends up turning it around, kills both of them, pretty much blows open the game from right there. I mean, they didn't necessarily, take an early 2, 3, 4,000 early game gold lead, but they kind of just waited it out until Zeri was strong, and then Zeri took over.
So with that dive, I would have to go back and look at it again because I don't remember what the lane, like the wave state was like. But what I've noticed from TL is they do this in every game. Now it's not always top, but like they're diving early all the time, and I think their logic probably is at worst it's a 1-for-1. I mean, at worst they botch the dive and it's not a 1-for-1, right? Like, do you remember how Bwipo like got awkwardly pathed like down so he couldn't finish off the kill? Do you remember what I'm talking about
Yeah, I
in
mean,
that
well,
dive?
that's what I said at the beginning. Like, it was a pretty ambitious dive because they had no minion wave. Like, they
But
were
the
just
thing
straight
is,
up running into the tower.
so yeah, but normally they do these dives and they trade 1-for-1 a lot, but then they end up crashing the wave, and so the other top laner falls by. I'm just trying to figure out their logic here. So my guess is their logic is like, well, it's okay if we 1-for-1 because the wave state will be better for us because he'll have to miss a wave that's crashing under his tower. I don't remember if that happened in that specific play, but the reason I bring it up is because in so many games, and we saw it in the other series as well with Team Liquid, they just dive insta always, and they're actually really good at it despite looking really bad at it in that particular play.
Yeah, it was just once again felt like a tale of two like stories with Team Liquid in a lot of these series in the playoffs so far, where they just come out and look really flat in some of these games. And on the other hand, it's just a completely different game plan once they sort of find their comfort champions. It's just, I mean, we'll get into the TL versus EG series later, obviously, but to me, it feels like with this Team Liquid team, when they don't get their preferred champion picks or a draft that they feel comfortable with, they just seem lost. And when they don't really have an identity within the context of the game or a direction in how they're supposed to play through, if, for example, like this top lane play fails because their game plan was clear. And like you said before, they've been doing a lot of these dives. And in a lot of games, their plan is to dive top early on a stacked wave and shut the enemy top laner down. And especially when you're playing a matchup like Jax versus Aatrox, Jax is going to be able to run away with the game should he get an early game lead. And, you
Yeah.
know, that game plan just went out the window for Team Liquid because after that top lane dive, you just could see that they really had no idea what to do.
Yeah, and I will say that like it is playing to Santorin's style, right? How many times have we talked about Santorin and how good he is at getting early ganks off? That's what they do. And for the most part, again, not in game 1, for the most part they've been very successful with it. So I have no problem with them doing that. I've always said I'd rather the proactive risky play than the sit and wait play because when Worlds comes
Yeah,
around,
same.
you're
I
not going
agree.
to get that many opportunities to make plays. Pardon me?
I was just saying I agree. I 100%
Yeah,
agree.
you're not like when Worlds comes around, you're gonna want to be the team that acts first and puts the other team in a position where they're too late to react or too late to make a play happen or whatever it is, right? Don't let the other team get to their game plan or their win condition. Take over first. And all year long, TL's been very good at that. They just can't close out the damn games. But for me, I have no issues with the way specifically Santorin has played. I think he is hands down the best player from TL this past weekend, but probably even for the year.
Yep.
Yeah, probably for the year.
Definitely for the year. I mean, this guy's a monster. His like ad libbing that he does in the early game when it comes to finding creative paths to gank lanes, and whether that's predicated on good level ones and good understanding of what the enemy teams like their habits and what they like to do with their wards in the first 3 levels of the game, and being able to path to avoid all these wards because you see it almost every single game with Santorin. He's looking for a gank at level 3.
Yeah.
Lately he's been pretty much exclusively playing level 3 gank type champions, primarily the Trundle. We even saw some Sedge last week in the
He's
playoffs.
been doing it on Wukong as well.
Yeah, Wukong. I mean, and when it comes to pros, like a successful gank doesn't always mean a kill, but if you can burn a flash, especially in a meta which heavily involves Azir, with that being one of Bjergsen's best champions. It just has like the most reliable follow-up gank setup you can ever have when the enemy mid has no flash because you're almost guaranteed to get the shuffle. And you can kind of see that Santorin knows exactly what he wants to do within the first 5, 6 minutes of the game, whether that's going mid early to blow a flash or get a kill, or dive top on a stacked wave. It just seems like Santorin was pulling his weight, if not more, and the rest of the team was kind of failing him, whether that was individual execution or just kind of failures as a team.
And we'll talk a little bit more about Santorin, obviously, when we get to the later series as well. But I do want to mention that I don't think it's a coincidence because I think primarily he wants to go bot lane. Just with, I mean, we see how strong AD carries can be right now, especially when you have Zeri in the game. I mean, they were playing Jinx in the other series, but like you can see that AD carry right now is a lot of win. It's the win condition for a lot of games. But I don't think it was a coincidence that he was going top against CLG. No offense to Dokla, he's been free kills, man. He's been dying a lot. And I was looking at the death. I should have had it pulled up. I was looking at the death numbers, um, just on Game of Legends, and there's other people that have more deaths per game, but he has like he is up there with a large sample size. So the most deaths per game in playoffs is actually Spica, um, with an average of 4 deaths per game. But I do want to point out that 10 games for him, and there was also the one Vi game where he died 10 times. Right, so there's like an outlier there.
I would thought it was going to be higher
Dope.
than 4. 4 seemed kind
Pardon
of
me.
low. For Spica, I was
No,
expecting it to
4
be
is a
like,
lot.
well, I was just
In pro
saying,
play? In pro
well,
play, 4 deaths, average 4 deaths is a lot. That's leading the league for playoffs.
uh,
Average deaths being 4. That's a lot in pro play. That's not a lot in like solo queue,
I
but
guess they've
yeah.
been winning their fair share of games as well. Because they
Yeah,
had,
and the other thing, Dokla is 3.5, but that's over the span of 15 games. Like that is a much larger sample size than other people. Like Closer's up there, but again, Closer that was like Closer had only had 5 games at the time. Um, Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is Dokla's dying a lot, and I'm not surprised they're going top. And we honestly, we if we're being completely honest, seen Dokla fall off quite hard as the summer split went on and into playoffs. And I think that was an area where CLG could have looked a lot better if they wanted to win that series. And it started making me wonder maybe it was too late to see Dokla pull out like the Yone in more games because I feel like he was a lot better on those picks where like he struggled in like Ornn lanes, for example.
yeah, and once the series flipped over to Team Liquid's favor, you definitely saw them playing a lot more through top lane, despite the failures in game one when it came to executing that game plan. But I mean, just looking at like the numbers, like 6 deaths, like 2-6 in game three, 0-3-0 in game four, and 2-6-3 in game five. So, that's like another like over 4.5 deaths per games in
Yeah.
those ones. But when Teal managed to turn it around, it didn't feel like they did anything special or they kind of turned it on all of a sudden. It just felt like their early game plans and execution was just normal this time because you didn't really see them failing these early plays. Like we've seen almost all year, we saw Santorin pulling off these successful games mid lane and top lane, burning flashes, getting kills, diving champions on stacked waves. And I just think that, for whatever reason, TL seems to kind of ramp up over the course of a playoff series. They start out slow, but they seem to end strong, and we definitely saw that in this series. And we'll talk about it eventually, but CLG made the unfortunate mistake of dropping their Zillion ban in Game 5.
Yeah, I don't know how Bjergsen gets Zillion in Game 5. I mean, that's so easy for us to say, but I mean, it goes through your head. How can you ignore that? You're like, oh, you gave Bjergsen Zillion in Game 5? Why did you do that?
Yeah, but the
Or
weird
honestly,
part
why would you
was,
ever give Bjergsen, regardless of Game 5? Why would you ever give him Zillion? And that's so easy for us to say, right? Because drafts are very complicated to say the least. Um, but yeah, it's not going to pan out for you.
yeah, but the thing that was weird about it was CLG recognized when they went up 2-0 in the series, they started to actually ban the Zillion preemptively because I think that's smart on their part. Doing some forward thinking that, hey, TL might try to resort to comfort picks, they might try to get the Zillion early on, so let's start banning it away. And I thought that was really smart of CLG in both games 3 and 4 when they had the 2-0 lead, or in game four's case, a 2-1 lead to ban the Zillion. But in game
Yeah.
5, they decided to drop that Zillion ban, which is just kind of baffling. And you see TL pick it up on like R2, R3, and game 5, regardless of its LCS, LEC, wherever it is around the world, game 5 usually kind of players end up falling back to comfort picks. And I think we saw that in this entire game 5 We saw Dokla on the Yone, Palafox on the Akali, Bjergsen on the Zillion, and Whipple on the Aatrox. Like those are just all like straight up comfort picks for everybody involved there. And you kind of saw CLG kind of go full YOLO into this super enchanter tank comp of TL, which in my opinion was just a recipe for disaster because it just requires you to play perfectly. And although it started off well for CLG with their first top lane dive, where was it even a dive or was it a solo kill? But top lane got ahead early on. It was a dive, but then Dokla just slowly started to lose the 1v1 in the side lane, and you kind of saw the wind completely go out of CLG's sails, and they reached team fighting stages, and good luck killing an Aatrox and what was Santorum playing? Sejuani? Good luck killing Aatrox and Sejuani 2 times through Zillion ulti. Like, it's just going to be impossible.
True, true. And we mentioned how like Dokla was definitely the punching bag for TL in the series, but I don't want to lay all the blame at his feet because there were obviously some other areas where CLG had big time blunders. I don't remember the specific game, but they contest Herald. They start the fight. Nobody on their team has ultimate. I don't know in what world you take a Herald fight when no one on your team has R and the other team all have R, or maybe nearly all. I don't remember exactly, but I remember thinking there's no way they're taking this fight right now. And of course, things don't go their way. TL gets an advantage, and you start to fall behind. So it's definitely. I know we focus a lot on how TL focused topside and kind of just beat up on Dokla, which is true, but there's definitely other reasons why CLG lost this series, and I think just taking poor fights is one of them. Which, to be fair, is like that's kind of CLG's thing. They just want to fight. Like they're playing very aggro. That's contracts, I guess, as well. Um, and I honestly think that even though they are a little too aggro, I actually still think that's why they improved so much. We mentioned like 5-10 minutes ago about how it's good to be the proactive team and be the team to act first and keep the other team on their heels. I think that's one of the reasons why we saw CLG get better, but they just need a little bit more restraint, I think.
Yeah, they definitely seemed in certain spots a little over eager to get fights going, especially when they didn't necessarily have the resources in their advantage. But I do think at the same time that the way that they are drafting with these very skirmish focused team comps and assassin dive the backlines style team fights that are going to play out, that's what you have to do. And it's they kind of had to fight fire with fire basically, and TL were just the better players at the end of the day. I think that's kind of what the series came down to. I don't think that one team had some massive advantage, in either direction, whether it was, drafting or even gameplay wise. I just think that, DL just individually, you kind of saw their prowess over the,
And
the younger
usually
players of CLG.
And usually when a series goes 5 games, it's because there's no clear better team. Usually,
Yeah,
so that's not really surprising. I don't really have anything else on this series. I mean, maybe some things, but we got a lot to get through. Is there anything else on this, or did
yeah.
you want to move on?
No, that's okay. The CLG Miracle Run came to an end. I mean, we'll talk about them a little bit more, but
Yeah, we'll
good.
get to a postmortem on them in a little bit. But yeah, definitely a much improved year for them. Before we move on to EGTSM, reminder guys, please hit the subscribe button and please hit the like button. I mentioned last week how like if you go and look at our videos from the last month or 2 months or whatever, or even just from the start of Summer Split versus the views that we have now, people are watching more and more, and it's because you guys are subscribing more and hitting the like button more. It helps us a lot. So if you want to know just how much that helps us, go look at our views. Were I don't know what 200 to 300. Yes, we're small creators, and now they're sitting around 400 or 500. It makes a big difference. So if you guys want to support us, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I know that's the cliche thing, but God, it helps. So please consider doing that. EGTSM, another 5 game banger. Not
The
supposed to be 5 games, but
8 hour
it was.
banger.
Yeah, hour.
I think it was
Yeah,
like
like
8 hours long,
eight
the whole
hour.
thing.
Yeah,
It was 7 or 8 hours, the whole like from beginning to end.
it was long. Uh, I mean, what can you do? I know there was like some TSM fans that were upset. I know the one pause. There's like a charm midair, and people are saying, "Oh, well, he can dodge the charm because he sees it coming." I ultimately don't think the pauses had any crazy effect in EG's favor. Easy for me to say. As I'm wearing the EG jersey, it looks, and it's easy for me to say as not a TSM fan. Um, but I still think that people took it way too far as thinking that TSM got hard screwed over by these pauses. It's not like EG intended any of this, right? If you lose audio, you pause. And I think was it Spica? Someone on TSM came out and tweeted later, like, yeah, no problems with the pauses, like it's what you have to do. Basically just making up for the Duncan, the social media guy for TSM, looking like a clown. I think it was Spica that came out and said something to be like, yeah, just so you know, we're okay with it. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's just a bit of an unfortunate situation, and I mean, momentum is an important thing in series.
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
is, when one team has momentum, you can definitely feel it in terms of just the performance, seeing it in real time, especially when it comes to like comebacks within the game. When you're feeling good, you feel like you have more gold than you actually have, stuff like that. So I can definitely understand why maybe the TSM fan base does feel, I wouldn't use the word cheated, but a little cheated because, TSM, they were the team that was up 2-1 in the series, and there unfortunately was a lot of, instances where there was some unfortunate and unlucky pauses.
Hmm.
But like you kind of said at the beginning, it's just what you have to do. And
Yeah.
for all the comments that are being thrown around on social media and everything, you know, both EG and TSM came forward and said like both teams were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing, pausing at the
Right.
correct times,
Yeah. I
listening
don't.
to riot officials, and they were both involved in the process of making the decision to continue to play the series with no audio or whatever it was that they did. I personally wasn't watching the games live at that time, so I didn't really experience the whole pausing shenanigans in real time, but from what I understand, everybody was doing everything that they possibly could, and nobody was doing anything, harmful or, vengeful or anything like that.
Yeah, just for clarity's sake, I don't mind if TSM fans are upset with what happened. It is upsetting because I do think pauses affect the game, even if it's just because it's a really long pause, or if it is because like you see what's happening on the screen, you have more time to react. I don't mind if you're upset because of that. I guess what I'm saying is it's not EG's fault, which is what the Duncan guy seemed to indicate by like calling out EG for pausing and stuff. Like, bro, I don't know.
Yeah, it was just ridiculous. That guy on Twitter.
Yeah, it's
Fuck that
stupid.
guy.
What else? What else is new? Um, so I want to start with saying I thought TSM played so much better than expected. Don't get me wrong. EG not looking like the EG we've seen all summer, but TSM doing some really smart things. The one play that really I think Mark Z called it out. So shout out to him, but he pointed out that TSM was just hovering around drag the one time. And normally like that's really bad when you say like when you see someone just hovering watching the other team do drag, you're like either contest or don't contest. But what they did in this play was they waited for them to do the drag and just sat in the brush waiting for them to rotate back and then committed to the fight, and that's where Maple went in with the Azir shuffle. But it was so smart because they waited for EG's top. They waited for Impact to start rotating top. So you have solo hitting top lane plates as EG's doing drag. You see Impact say, "Oh, we're getting the drag. I can go back top now." They wait for him to rotate and then they make the engage. It was just such like a smart play, knowing that full well that they're going to have to rotate back to lane, and that's not something you see very often. So honestly, just I don't think you see that out of TSM at all in spring or early summer. Much improved when you start to see like I don't know, just using your head stuff like that. Like it was just really smart.
Yeah, they're definitely TSM had their fair share of good plays. They also had their fair share of questionable plays, let's say,
What else is new?
coming out of tactical. Game one was basically just a who can throw harder simulator.
Tactical's
Uh,
the easiest punching bag out of the whole weekend. I mean he's been like that for the whole what last year and a half.
yeah,
He's been the
pretty
easiest
much.
guy like to flame. Maybe contracts in spring, I guess. Other than contracts in spring, I think the easiest guy to like flame for performance has to be tactical.
Yeah, I mean he was doing his damnedest in game one to make sure that EG picked up the win, but I was just kind of surprised that tactical didn't get subbed out the whole series.
Yeah, honestly, the thing is, you could tell TSM's kind of like a pick your poison scenario with the 80 carries. They clearly don't think that their other 80 carries ready, and I mean, Tactical should be ready. He doesn't look it at all. So what do you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I mean, I'm no LCS coach or whatever, but his continuous mistakes just to me are too egregious to continue to have him out there in a best of five, especially when it's your world spot on the line. You know,
so costly.
it's about like hindsight is 2020, whatever, but
Yeah.
it's just the norm now for tactical. I know that there was discussions in the past that people were thinking that he could outgrow this and he could sort of fix these problems that started to crop up last year. Like we talked, like he started the whole inting thing in spring of season 11, and he's really never solved it. He just continues to misposition in team fights,
Ever since the
overestimate.
Malphite meme.
Yeah, overestimate, his survivability, damage, all of the above. There was just so many instances this series where he's just running melee into the enemy team with no care in the world, like brother
And there's no
tactical.
explanation for it. Like a lot of times when you see players make mistakes, like when I'm like reviewing the games and I'm watching them, I'll be like, "Oh, I could see what he's doing here." Like I get like you don't want to do that, but I could see why you make that mistake. And when you're watching these games, you're kind of head scratching, right? You're going, "I don't see what the angle was here." But it's a play that happened and there's no like analysis that can really be done about it. He's just inting.
Yeah,
And you feel
he's just hinting.
I know a lot of people don't feel bad for players that are running it down. I do because I don't know, like I like tactical. He seems like a nice guy. I'm sure he doesn't want to be running it down. So I can't help but just feel bad for him that his career's taken such a downturn. And who knows? Maybe he finds it, right? Maybe the offseason happens. He won't be an LCS. I highly doubt that. But maybe he finds his game again in academy. And maybe he makes it back. Maybe he pulls a Contracts or a Dokla. Who knows, right?
Yeah, he definitely feels like a player that obviously has potential because we've seen him at his peak and we've actually seen him do some damage against other top tier bot laners and AD carries within the league. However,
Yeah.
he does just seem to have some consistent issues which need to be solved should he be on an LCS team because
And
in
we
his
keep
current
hearing
form, he's just a hindrance to whatever team he might be on.
and we keep hearing from like the analyst desk or just people around the league saying like he's such a confidence driven player is kind of the narrative that he's gotten. And so like I guess if you want to regain confidence, the best place for him to do that would probably be in academy, honestly.
Yeah, shit on some
So
academy players and then
he's not a player I would give up on. Definitely would for LCS, but I wouldn't give up on signing him for Academy. I feel like that's a player that could definitely see a resurgence if he finds his game again. Over to the other side of things, the EG side, I thought Vulcan had a really good series, man. His Alistar is good. He continuously finds flanks on the Rakan. He was kind of flanking Rakan. He was very Ignar esque, honestly. And Ignar's got a really good Rakan. Um, the one Vulcan flank was massive. When like you remember he's in Tribrush and he sneaks around bot lane, just barely gets missed by the minion
yeah,
wave.
yeah.
Huge flank and such a nice play. Like that's the stuff that's those clutch plays that end up winning you a series. Stuff like that. So huge shout out to Vulcan. I thought he had a really good, honestly, weekend for being completely honest. Not
Yeah,
just series, but weekend.
it was pretty much just like the Vulcan of old, this kind of
Yeah.
meta right now, which is,
Hmm.
it's kind of enchanter or bust. Right now, in the series, what Vulcan played an Alistar game, a Rakan game, two Tahm Kench games, and a Nautilus game. So no enchanter games, and pretty much only playing engage type champions. His game one Rakan, despite the loss, was fantastic with all the flanks that he was able to pull off. They were working the Senna Tahm Kench really, really well. I thought Danny, he had some shaky spots in this series, but the two games that they were playing Senna Tahm Kench were like pretty flawless out of the both of them. And this is what top tier Vulcan looks like. This is what we saw with Vulcan on Cloud 9 in both uh season the end of season 10, sort of the middle and end of season 10, and the beginning of season 11 when Cloud9 was really dominant. It was just when Vulcan was on this play style, and the flanks that he's able to find and pull off in team fights are just some of the best. Very similar to Ignar and Core JJ when they're on these playmaker type champions. They just do a lot of work, and it's just kind of a nice surprise to see in this really heavy enchanter meta because it can get a little boring. But these champs like Rakan, Alistar, Nautilus, there's just always a lot of excitement because you just have that go button, and if anyone's out of position for even a second, you have the chance to capitalize on it.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The other thing too is I mentioned how like CLG was just taking fights they shouldn't be taking. We saw that out of EG in that series as well, which was the biggest worry to me. Is like this team's such a good team fighting team, but I wonder if that confidence like has gotten to them where they're taking fights that they just shouldn't. because and I mentioned how CLG took a fight where they didn't have ultis. Well, Inspired started the Herald when he was level 5. So first of all, you're getting out jungled because you're like really normally you're level 6 by that time. But then also starting up the Herald without, I think it was Trundle, yeah, without Trundle ulti. Trundle is not a champion without ultimate in a team fight. That is,
Yeah.
he's a good ganking champion, but as far as a team fight champion, he's nothing without his R. And so that was like another head scratcher. And that was where I started to worry for EG. Obviously, we know that as the weekend went on, they started to look a lot better. But like, I don't know, man. That's worrisome if you ask me.
Yeah, I think part of that did have to do with the type of comps that EG was running into TSM, because you could definitely see EG on this more hard engage, heavy team fight style, and TSM was going for more of this um, enchanter, long, drawn out team fights. And when EG kind of flubs their engages against, these beef tanks and Scion and Swain, and then you have an enchanter to buff up the rest of your team if you fail your engage, that's where you could kind of see EG getting really punished. So, you know, like you said at the beginning, they had some really good team fights and some not so good team fights when they're overstepping or maybe, overplaying their hand a little bit. But I think part of that had to do with kind of the style of comps that they were playing. At the same time, EG's got to clean that up if they want to regain their spot at the top.
Mm-hmm. Nothing else really more for this series. I guess I should point out Spica actually had some. Well, he had a lot of nice plays and a lot of bad plays. Actually, his Xin Zhao was actually kind of insane, just running over the game.
Oh yeah, he
There was the
just
one play where he spots Inspired. I think this was game one. He spots Inspired and pushes him back into his jungle, but knows he has to base here. Waits for him to base, like just through timing. He doesn't see him base, but waits for him to base, and then they pull off the dive top. That was another like play to point to where like TSM is playing very smart. Like that was just another play where, yeah, using 5 head. So shout out to Spica for that. I guess had a couple of ints in the series on Vi again, honestly, but still looking a lot better than what we had seen out of Spica. So much improved.
yeah, he still looks pretty solid for the most part, despite TSM's year-long struggles. He was, you know, consistently playing at a, pretty decent level. I mean, he wasn't a top jungler in the league this year, but he wasn't a bottom tier jungler by any means.
And you got
Paired
to
up
give
with
benefit
Maple.
just for like how long of a season it is when you're in what is a shit show. And still, we've heard that there's things happening behind the scenes that have been disaster. Of course, we don't get to hear what that is, but it sounds like TSM, um, even more than what we know, is even a bigger dumpster fire. Just people don't want to share what the hell happened,
Yeah,
and so you
we'll
gotta you
we'll,
gotta give
we'll find out
props
the
for a player
stories in the
sticking
off
around.
season.
I hope so. I hope so. Waiting for it's like as long as Doublelift or Lena find out, we will know.
Yeah.
C9 100,
Yep. I think
huge surprise,
yeah,
right?
both of us had the 3-2 to 100 Thieves. I think we did. Maybe you had. Did we both have 3-2?
I think I would have gone 3-1. I mean, I
Okay,
don't remember
maybe
what I said, but
I
just
said
thinking
3-2.
about it, I would have said 3-1 for 100 if I, but I don't remember what I said.
Yeah. You know, this series was, like I said at the beginning of the episode, very, very close for a 3-1. Almost every single game was back and forth. The only one that was a
Game 3 was
clear-cut win,
shit.
yeah, the only one that was a clear-cut win was game 3. When
Can I call draft gap on that one? I know I say this all the time. I hate to be like draft gap. It's something that we don't really like to do on this show. But when I see Lucian and Nami getting out traded by the Zeri and Lulu, I don't know whether to be like, oh, is Berserker and Sven that good?
I mean, they
Or is
win
this
every
like,
lane,
is
so
Lucian Nami just not that good?
they
Uh,
literally just win every single lane. I don't think that Berserker and Sven have lost a lane in the entire playoffs. I'm trying to even think back to the CLG games, but I don't think they've lost a single lane.
But I'm watching the Lucian Nami like trade, and I didn't see any like crazy mistakes, but they're just not winning the trade, and so I'm going like, who is their draft or who is their scrim partners? Like, do they have bad information thinking that like they're supposed to hard smash this lane, or maybe Berserker and Sven is that good? I don't know. I didn't see any crazy mistakes out of FBI and who he went in the specific trades that I was talking about, and they just weren't winning those trades. And I'm like, okay, well, if you can't even win trades in lane against this matchup, what are you drafting it for? The Nami Lucian was fucking useless, man.
Yeah,
So bad.
one
And
thing
you're
that
getting over at Zeri Lulu, man.
one thing that I will say is I do feel like the identity of Nami Lucian has, changed a little bit. because this laning duo was originally a very strong early game pairing, and it still is. It's still quite strong in the early game, but it has sort of morphed into more of a mid-game power spike and build, in my opinion, with the whole going first strike on Lucian and electrocute on Nami, because you're really looking to spike at 1 to 2 items. Lucian really wants this Gale Force rapid fire cannon build, and you want your Nami to have Imperial Mandate plus presumably some more AP, whether that's with a Dark Seal, Oblivion Orb, whatever, because you're foregoing the PTA on Lucian, which is more consistent damage, and you're not doing the Airy and or Guardian that would come out from the Nami, which makes your laning so much better because you have that higher sustain, and higher sustain will just in turn lead to more damage because you can outlast your opponents. So I do think that Lucian Nami right now is a little bit misunderstood because I think it previously had the expectation that you're supposed to go up and start smashing lane and you should be up 10 to 15 to 20 CS. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. However, you still shouldn't be losing the lane, and they were losing the lane.
And the thing is, with how strong Zeri and Lulu are, the margin for error is so small when you pick. Like, it's always been a small margin of error, when it comes to Lucian in general, honestly. That's kind of the chance. Even when he was mid, it was kind of always like that. It was like one little mistake and you fall behind and you just lose. And so that's even just another reason why I really don't like it. Um, so yeah, I would call game 3 a draft gap, but I don't want to take anything away from Berserker because I still think he had a great series. Even the Neela game, that was beast. I loved watching it. The one team fight, it basically secures them soul. It was just a huge, like, he just goes in, such a monster. I'm pretty sure it was game 4.
Yeah, it was the last game where he just flashed onto the back line and insta killed
Yeah,
Huhi and then
that
killed
was
FBI.
sweet.
Yeah, it got him killed because he jumped into 4 people, killed 2 of them though,
Didn't
and
matter.
yeah,
Yeah, worth.
Cloud9 cleaned up the fight. That was where like Fudge and Sven were the only ones left, so Camille and
Now,
Yumi were
I
doing the
think
Drake.
someone was dead when he made that move, right? Did someone on C9 die before he did that, or am I thinking of a different fight?
Not sure, but it was
Maybe, yeah, I might be getting things wrong. Dude, I've
Fudge
seen so
kind of
many games, my
engaged.
brain is mush. My
Yeah, I
brain is
mean
mush trying to remember all the games from the weekend.
Fudge led that fight by eing in on Camille and they one shot Someday, but in turn, when Jensen went in,
Mhm.
I think he got like one shot by Closer. But at that same time, Berserker's flashing onto the backline, killing the Enchanter and AD Carry pretty much solo, dies for it. But when you're trading your life 1 for 2 and you're killing the strongest 2 members on the enemy team, and not to say the strongest members, but the 2 most useful in a long drawn out team fight, is always a win.
Yeah.
So Berserker was pretty much smurfing the entire series. Like I said before, I don't think he's lost a lane the entire playoffs. Even in these really stale Enchanter matchups, is consistently getting the better of their opponents. I think Sven also has to do a lot with that because he's
Yeah,
clearly
of
made a lot of
course.
improvements in support. He's not really making any of these early game positional mistakes that we saw a little bit of at the beginning of the split, and he sort of seems to have found his identity in the team, which is buff up Berserker
The one
and
thing
don't
that
look
I'll say
back.
is game 2 when FBI and Huhi are on the Callista Amumu, they don't win the lane, but they do at the same time because, like, they're not like up CS or anything like crazy like that. But the reason that they're playing that is to get prio and take drags, and they start dragon stacking, and ultimately, like, that to me is what they draft that bot lane for. So I guess you could kind of call that winning. I don't really know what to consider that, but I guess what I'm saying is 100 Thieves got what they wanted out of that bot lane. It's not like anything against C9 saying, "Oh, you lost lane, so you lost drag." It's not really like that. It's kind of just that's how it should go. And so 100 Thieves drafting in that game a lot better because even if you don't hard stomp the lane with the Callista Mumu, you're getting what you want out of it, and that's dragon stacking, and ultimately that helped them in that game.
Yeah, plus I think we really saw the power of Gwen in that game. You could kind of see with Cloud9's comp, a very one-dimensional comp, which is front-to-back team fighting. Gwen can just throw down that W and start to damage your front line without being hit in return. And you saw once the game went late and Gwen hit 3 items, she just started melting everybody in
Mm-hmm.
sight. I mean, Abadage also hit a really nice 3-man Talia W in that sort
He
of
had a great Talia game.
jungle river fight near Dragon. Yeah, Abadage had a really nice game. I think that was a game where I thought both teams were actually playing really, really well. it was, Cloud9 just got outscaled by the Gwen.
Yeah, I
That
thought
was
this
the
was a
only
great
thing.
series. This made me feel a lot better because, I mean, going back maybe just last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever, I wasn't that sold on Cloud9. And to be honest, I'm still not completely there yet. It still only has been a couple of weeks, but they're looking good, man. Like, they're looking a lot better. And we had kind of just said, like, you're running out of time, C9. Well, they didn't run out of time. They turned things around. They're looking so much more solid. Back to your point on the Abadage thing. I thought he looked really good on the Talia. I'm not a huge fan of him on the Seraphine. It feels like too often he's trying to get in there in places that he just shouldn't be. Walking up into range of like Blabber Pillar without flash, like that's the freest kill ever. Like you're just gonna get pillared and die. Whereas like I think he's a lot better on those plays where on those champions where he can make plays and he's a lot more mobile, like Ari or Azir. I feel like that's his comfort. And so I guess I don't really want to see him on the Seraphine anymore. I think he's just so much better when he's either on a damage dealer or just a playmaker kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, when we do want to talk about the identity of these two teams, Cloud9, at least for the most part during playoffs, definitely seem to be a very bot lane focused team. And I think that 100
Hmm.
Thieves still primarily rely on their mid jungle in terms of opening up the map and making dive plays happen in top and bot lane. And I definitely agree with you when Abadage is not on some early game playmaker that can influence the map, he can sometimes get a little, maybe the right word is impatient, where he does kind of feel the need to get in there and be as useful as possible. And
Yeah.
in a couple instances he overstepped and he got his flash blown before, like in a lot of the dragon skirmishes, like the dance for positioning that was happening in that last game 4. On two separate occasions he got his flash blown before the team fight started, which Cloud9 would kind of fake and engage with Camille, and you know Seraphim will blow her flash, or he get ulted and have to blow stopwatch and then flash out after, and Cloud9 will kind of back off, reset, reassess the fight, wait for cooldowns, go back in again. And you kind of saw Abadaga getting punished for his continuous positioning mistakes because, like I said, two separate occasions he just went into the team fight with no flash and got insta blown up by Camille.
And in his post game interview, he said that like C9, this is so cliche to be like, well, we learned a lot and C9 exposed some of our weaknesses. So like that's a good thing for us. I actually agree here. I know that's like the most like that's so cliche to say that, but I actually think it's true. And I think, well, I was wondering if you had any idea of like some of the weaknesses that were exposed in this series. For me, the one that I just mentioned was I do think Abadage is a lot weaker on Seraphine. So if you take away those solid picks of his, where you could get him off of either Talia, Azir, or Ari, which is a very difficult thing to do to get someone off of 3 champions. But if you manage to do it or manage to get good matchups into those champions, I think you'll have success. The other thing is, I think just draft. I think bot lane drafting specifically the Lucian Nami, as I mentioned, not the thing that you want to do. So I think those are the two areas, the two weaknesses that were definitely exposed. And I guess maybe a third one. Um, Someday in isolation did not have a good weekend.
Yeah, I
A
mean, for
lot of
me,
useless deaths. Team fought really well, but a lot of useless deaths where you're not getting anything else on the other side of the map or anything like that. And so like that was another area where it's like someday you gotta relax when you're isolated and when you're on weak side, for example. Like the one time 100 Thieves is taking Dragon and Fudge kind of baits him as Kennen to engage on him, and of course he takes the bait and engages and then just dies. Like you got to understand when you're weak side. So that was a little bit of a whoopsie from Someday.
yeah, I think if you look at the series collectively, the biggest gap between individual players I thought was top lane. And that's weird to say because Fudge didn't have a great regular season in the summer split,
And
and
Someday had a
someday
great regular season.
he was the clear-cut best top player in the league. And
Yeah.
I think this playoffs specifically, I guess not specifically, but in these playoffs, we've seen Fudge's laning really regain, kind of come back to what he was doing in season 11, spring playoffs and summer, where he's actually able to dominate these laning phases, is utilizing the counter picks really, really well. For whatever reason, Aatrox is just back in the meta as this blind pickable top laner that people are doing. And Fudge, to me, seems to be the only one in the LCS that can continuously punish the blind pick Aatrox pick with a multitude of other picks. We saw in this series he played the Kennen, played the Gnar, and then played I don't know if he played Camille into Aatrox or if it was Camille into Ornn. No, it was Camille into Aatrox. So, 3 different counter picks into Aatrox in this series alone. Even in the series against CLG, we saw him whip out Kennen 2 times into Aatrox. I, like, I, For the OG viewers, I fucking hate Aatrox as this just like blind pick top laner that just comes into the meta when all the other top laners have been nerfed. Um, yeah, I fucking hate it, and Fudge is pleasing me with his continually shitting on Aatrox in almost
Mm.
every single lane phase. And throughout this entire playoffs, like I said, Fudge's laning has just gotten so much better. And to me, in this playoffs, has looked like the top laner that was on C9 and was smurfing at MSI 2021, solo killing, RNG, who was RNG stop at the time even? Wasn't Ben.
Was
Was it Xiaohu?
Xiao who
Yeah,
top?
Xiaohu was back in top lane, so like Budge was solo killing Xiaohu, was laning really, really well against Khan, playing really well against a lot of these high tier international top laners. And this is exactly what I want to see going into Worlds because we've talked about this before, even specifically last year. The NA style of top lane is horrible at the World Championship
It is.
because you see these Korean and Chinese top laners will always pick this mechanically intensive counter pick, whether it's like a Fiora, a Jax, a Camille, whatever it is, Gangplank. They'll pick it into your blind pick tanks. They don't give a fuck. And that's exactly what Fudge is doing, and I think that's part of the reason why Cloud9 is finding so much success is Fudge, similar to bot lane, is also winning every single lane. And it's just making the rest of Cloud9's lives easier, specifically Blabber, when almost all their players are winning lane all the time.
Yep. And at the start of the show, we asked like, how has C9 managed to come alive? And I think there's just so many areas to point to.
Yeah,
You
like
mentioned Fudge. You mentioned Fudge looking so much better, which is true. Blabber starting to look a lot better. I'll get back to him in a second. Jensen looking really, really good. Might have got player of the series. I don't remember.
it
But
was Jensen, yeah.
even the game they lost, was it the Anivia game that they lost? I think.
Yeah,
Like I think his Anivia looks great.
yeah, I
I
agree.
if he continues to play more Anivia like this, people are going to start to think of him more than they think of Froggen with Anivia because his Anivia looks really, really good. The only difference is you don't really see it that often. But yeah, I don't know. He's looked really, really impressive, and C9 clearly understands what to do with bot lane now. Their bot lane looks so much better. Berserker is taking over so many games. I, I am still a little hesitant to see like what happens if they get him off of Zeri. Now we did see the Neela game, which was great. Just not a huge sample size of things. He's mostly been playing Zeri, but he still can't take away just because he's playing Zeri. Anyone can play Zeri. Anyone can ban it. I'll say it every fucking week if I have to. He looks great on it, and so you could honestly point everywhere. And so I'll get back to the Blabber thing. Um, the one team fight, 100 Thieves is chasing them, and Blabber's down to like 10%, and
Oh
then
yeah,
Fudge
the
TP's
Wukong.
in on the Kennen, and he just turns instantly on 10% health and gets a nice engage for the Wombo, the Wukong ult into Kennen ult. That's the stuff to see like Cloud9 looking much better. When you see a guy that is at 10% health, looks like he's way out of the fight. Most people do not turn that fight, and he manages to turn it. That's when you know C9 is on the same page and specifically in team fighting, and that's another good sign. So many reasons to believe that C9 has come alive, and so gaining a lot of faith from my end of things because I did not have a lot of faith just I don't know, even 2 weeks ago or whatever it was. So yeah, look much better, much
Yeah,
better.
they're definitely on the upswing, and we'll get to it later, but they could be the favorites. They could easily be the favorites going into
Yeah,
finals
that could
weekend.
be. Okay, TLEG.
Ah, yes, the classic seems to be dilemma we have in NA every single year, where there's two teams in the lower bracket that people believe, would or should be at Worlds, and only one of them can go. And
Coming into the series, it felt awful, man. It felt awful. This was like okay, when I was a kid, you would like, you'd ask your parents stupid questions. You'd be like, "Who's the favorite child?" And they like, "Oh, we can't choose," and like you don't really get it. And now I'm like, "Oh, okay," because you really want both of these teams. Like, it's hard to pick a favorite here. If I mean, assuming you're just an NA fan, right? I get that there's a lot of listeners that are EG fans or TL fans. For me, I just want NA to do well at Worlds. Um, and I thought that both of these teams would do that. A little less confidence in TL after the weekend, but hey, they're not going anymore. So yeah.
yeah, once again, a really close series. Another one where TL kind of starts out slow and gets shit on in game one. Uh, just kind of JoJo and Impact just destroying people in team fights with the Gangplank and the Azir. Um,
Yep.
Inspired J4 game, he didn't buy perfect stopwatch or didn't take the rune. He bought a stopwatch. Fuck that. Come on, bro. You're supposed to be my stopwatch on J4
Aren't
guy.
they're nerfing it, right? It's gonna cost 7 something now.
Another reason to take commencing stopwatch.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
cool. You just saved and you just saved an extra 100 gold. You're welcome.
Do you think he's gonna take it now?
I don't know. He didn't, dude. He did the spellbook Jarvan. He didn't take the stopwatch. Like, it was crazy. Come
Okay,
on,
I
bro.
know we already talked already about how good Santorin looked, but how can I not talk about Santorin again in this series? Was he like, I don't know if he was first blood king in every game, but like again, he is managing to find successful ganks, maybe in every game. I don't remember. A lot more focus on the bot side this time, but still absolutely insane how he manages to find these paths, not get spotted, pull off successful dives, and just get the lead. Like they get so many leads because of him. And then there's the
TL,
one play where he could like he kind of reads impact and sees that there's going to be a counter gank and flashes the Jarvan combo. That was only a 1-for-1 trade, but just you could tell that Santorin is on and his head's in the right space with these ganks. He knows exactly what he's doing. He looked so good.
yeah, TL had 4 out of the 5 first bloods in the series. The only first blood EG had was in game 5.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Which one
it's
was that one? Do you remember which one it was?
I don't.
Okay.
But yeah, with this Team Liquid team, obviously them missing out on Worlds is a massive disappointment, both probably to themselves and to the rest of North America, because you know I won't lie, like let's not remember, I pegged this team as the clear-cut spring and summer favorites. I thought they were going to easily
Didn't
be the
everyone?
best. I mean, yeah, regardless, just for myself, I had this team as the clear-cut number one. Like it wasn't even close. And, they started off pretty well in spring. They won lock-in. They were looking good for the majority of the regular season. And then all of a sudden, EG just kind of came out of nowhere and felt like stole the show at the end of spring. And, Team Liquid, yeah, they didn't win. They lost to 100 Thieves and EG in that spring playoffs, but I think people still had a lot of confidence going into Team Liquid for Summer Split. And while they weren't necessarily at the top the entirety of summer, they were pretty much second or third for the most part, kind of just trailing 100 Thieves and EG. But they still looked like a pretty solid team. They were, in my opinion, still one of the favorites heading into the summer playoffs. I had them sort of just ahead of Cloud9. I know you had them higher up compared to 100 Thieves and EG, but still, Worlds was the expectation for this roster. And you look at top to bottom, Santorin was really the only player throughout the entirety of this year that consistently was playing at a high level. I think
I agree.
the other player that you could probably throw in there is Bjergsen, but I don't think his highest performances were as, noticeable or impactful as Santorin. Santorin just does so much work for this team. Like, just go, like, all you need to do is go look at the series against CLG and EG. Santorin is running the whole damn show. Like,
So I want to know, do you think I'm wrong in saying that like I still put TL up there? Like, don't get me wrong, TL is not the best version of themselves. We know that. And that's the weird thing with TL, right? It's hard to like peg this team because where do you put them with like they're supposed to be so much better, but they're still really good? To me, they went 5 games with EG and they went 5 games with 100 Thieves. So to me, like, yeah, I still have them in the same area, in the same tier, if you will. The only difference is I had C9 way lower. I did not expect C9 to come out of the gate and look so good. So, do you think I'm wrong in putting TL in the same box as EG and 100 still?
um, I guess I would
It's hard to say,
say
isn't
I,
it?
I
It's
would
kind of like,
say I would say that's correct because I think that EG and 100 Thieves have dropped a bit, so therefore
mm,
they would now
okay.
be in the same tier. But I mean, like we said and you mentioned, like it wasn't like they got shit on. It was 3-2 and 3-2, the two series that they lost, and it's just unfortunate that this team is not going to represent NA at the World Championship. I say represent NA, but just even going to the World Championship, I think a lot of people wanted to see this team because it was built to do well internationally because they picked up all these players who have
Yeah,
this incredibly high skill ceiling individually. It was just, presumably they were going to pull it together as a team, but they just really never could.
I'll say it. I wanted to see Bjergsen play at Worlds. Like, as a North American fan, I absolutely wanted to see Bjergsen play at Worlds. The only problem is I would have been devastated if not being able to see EG, who's been like our best team for I don't know 4 or 5 months or whatever it's been. I would have been really depressed to not see them at Worlds. So that's why I say at the start of this segment, it's like pick your favorite child. It's like I can't. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's really, really sad to not be able to see Bjergsen and Santorin. I love Santorin too. He's another guy that I would have loved to see play. It's not going to happen though. And honestly, I don't even look at those two players mostly. Don't get me wrong, Bjergsen didn't look the greatest on a collie, but like even in that game, he's showing up to fights where like his team's taking the fight way before he can even get there. Specifically, the one in top lane where like two of his teammates are dead before he even gets there. That's where I'm like, don't get me wrong, fair to say JoJo outplayed him in that game. But if you're like, Bjergsen can't kill anyone, I'm like, well, dude, you're not supposed to be able to kill anyone going in 3v5 as a collie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a collie's supposed to like stay patient, wait for people to blow their sums, and then absolutely erase them once they're vulnerable and once they've used CDs. So still not the greatest Akali game out of Bjergsen, but I think that is such short sight in that specific game to just be like Bjergsen's Akali isn't good. Like it's very short sighted in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into, TL's failures and why it didn't really work out a little bit later, but to sort of flip over to the EG side of things, Jojo Pune absolutely
Yes.
smurfed this entire series. Even in their losses, I thought looked really, really good. I thought his game, just everything that he was doing in Game 5 was pretty much flawless. I
Okay,
thought,
can we talk about the final team fight in Game 5? Like, did you watch it or rewatch it, or did you like take like a long look at it or whatever?
yeah, I mean, I remember what happened. You're
Yeah.
asking.
So first he starts by forcing the cleanse off of Jinx. Um, then what does he do after that? I'm trying to remember exactly in what order things happen. I know he forces the cleanse, he forces the flash, he picks off core, he stalls for time with Zonia's. Like Impact is not even there on the Renekton. He is a mile away. It's 4v5, and he ends up going in, forcing all these CDs. Oh, he forces Bjergsen to ulti as well on the Galio. He forces out all of these cooldowns, all while Impact isn't even there. This is all 4v5, makes it all happen. Finally, Impact shows up and cleans up the fight. But to me, that was just such a huge outplay by JoJo. I can't say enough about it, how good that was. Unreal. For people, if you don't remember, go back and watch the fight. Watch JoJo on Silas there and see what he does. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to call you out or anything, but going back
go
to,
for it.
you know, for me, my all pro mid lane voting, I had Jojo at number 1. You didn't have him on the list.
Yeah,
And
dude, you're calling me out. He didn't have that great of a summer split. Don't
well,
get me wrong; it was a good summer split. To
I
me, it
thought
wasn't number one.
I thought
No
he did.
way.
I thought he did because I
Yeah, I know.
pers
Well, clearly people voted him number one. I just think that was way too overhyped. But that was just me.
yeah, I personally thought that he was just the most consistent mid laner over the entire year. And while I don't think that we necessarily saw the peak version of JoJo in the summer split compared to, some of his spring playoff performances, what we saw this weekend against TSM and Team Liquid was definitely, peak JoJo and what we were
See,
seeing in the
I didn't
spring
think he had
playoffs of
that great of
last
a
year.
series against TSM though. Honestly,
I thought he did.
like, or maybe I'm thinking of last week. Maybe I'm getting it confused with C9 last
He
week.
got shit on against Cloud9, so you
Yeah,
might you
okay,
might
so
be thinking of that one.
yeah, that's probably what I'm thinking of. But I guess my point being there is like if we're gonna talk about All Pro is a regular season award. So
Yeah,
like
but
I could easily just be
regardless of
like,
the
well,
playoff
look at what he did
performance,
last week, right? So the thing is, I had no issue with JoJo being number one just because I thought we actually had a lot of solid mids, contrary to popular belief. I think it kind of carried over from spring where everyone's like, our mid lanes suck. And I think that was kind of true in spring. I didn't think that was the case at all in summer. I thought Takui had a really good summer. I thought Abadage had a really good summer. Slow start, but still a really good summer. Bjergsen was good. JoJo was good. So like, I didn't mind JoJo being number one. But if we're comparing like why he's number one in All Pro versus this playoffs and what we saw this weekend, he played much better this weekend than what we saw in the summer split. No doubt in my mind. He was absolutely amazing this weekend. But
I
that's
guess
just me.
I guess I would say maybe he flew under your radar a little bit because I think, going back and looking
Maybe.
at it, he had a really good year overall. Obviously won Rookie of the Year. And going into Worlds, now that EG is obviously going to be one of the teams that's making Worlds, it's definitely important to see JoJo play at a high level going into the World
For sure.
Championship, and it's obviously a bonus that he actually had, some pretty decent performances at MSI 2022
Yep.
against other top teams, notably T1 and RNG. They did get 3-0'd by RNG in the semifinals or whatever, but you know they weren't completely. I guess I wouldn't say it was like it wasn't like EG was looking like shit. RNG was just that good. Uh,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I'm definitely excited for this EG team to make Worlds. I thought they were going to be at Worlds no matter what. I didn't think they'd be the third seed. I thought they were likely to be the first or second seed just based on their summer split performances. So despite the struggles that we've seen from them in the playoffs, I think that, you know, JoJo having a really great series and Inspired sort of I wouldn't say fixing his problems because he didn't really have that many problems. He was just having some really bad games, specifically against Cloud9, and even a couple of the games against TSM were a little bit shaky. But you know, this is kind of what I wanted to see from EG. You know, a very hard fought best of 5 series. I didn't want them to just get into Worlds and have some like shit show of a series like a C9 versus CLG or a CLG versus Golden Guardians where both teams look like shit. I thought in this series against Team Liquid, both teams are actually playing at a pretty high level, but you really just saw EG's team fighting and just overall better team coordination really shine in this game because, you know, TL just couldn't really pull it together.
Yeah, and I think maybe what we're seeing, because we're seeing like very different performances, right? Again, we say last week JoJo didn't look that great. This week he's looking so much better. Even Danny didn't even have the greatest series. Honestly, he got caught quite a bit with poor positioning. I guess it just feels like these young EG players are kind of just learning what the grind is over the course of a full year, right? Like it's very easy because I still have burnout in the back of my mind when it comes to this team, right? They still haven't really gotten a huge break. They took like a week off or something like that. Or after one of their mid split, sometime they took like a week off of scrims or something like that. And they didn't have a lot of time in between MSI and summer split. So I think that this team is kind of just learning what the whole long season grind is. And Worlds is still happening. So I hope that they take a small break after this weekend, after the Chicago weekend, take a small break, regroup, because they're going to have to get ready for Worlds again. They're just learning as they go, right? So it's that I don't know. That's just the way it goes. Um, to the point of specific player performances, just a few guys to shout out. You mentioned Inspired. The feels good thing for me about this weekend with Inspired was he had some smiting issues last week, right? Like sometimes just smiting early and losing. It
Yeah.
was nice to see him get some smite steals this weekend. And look, most of the time smites are just they're pinned on the jungler when it's not just a jungler thing. Last week there were some issues that it was his fault, and it was nice to see him bounce back and steal some and get some objectives for him, for himself and for his team.
Yep. Definitely, you know, Inspired bouncing back was something that I think is good for the people to see, mainly because he kind of just seemed like Inspired was crumbling before our eyes. Like, he got shit on by Blabber in the Cloud9 series and didn't have the greatest overall series against TSM. Had some pretty good individual games, like that one Sejuani game. He was like 9-0 with 10 assists, was just kind of smurfing.
Yeah.
But he's not broken, so we're all good.
Yeah.
They'll fix their problems that they have, hopefully, and you know they'll rep NA well at Worlds.
And that shit can get in your head, right? If you keep losing smite fights, like you could
Yeah, no,
eventually
for
start to
sure.
get in your own head, or the community starts to weigh on you. So you hope that it doesn't become a meme. Like there's the Dignitas Baron meme. Well, if you keep losing smites, it could easily become an inspired smite meme, right? And so getting those smites, I think, helps you build a lot of confidence. So that's really good. I don't want to go on too much longer, but just some quick shout outs for the weekend. Vulcan Bard, let's fucking go, man!
Oh yeah, I didn't even
Huge
talk
play
about
on
that.
Bjergsen on the Talia. Did we?
No, yeah, his Bard game was amazing.
Oh, I thought you said we talked about that. My bad.
No, no, we didn't. But yeah, that Bard game was absolutely 1v9.
Dude, that just the one play when the Talia is taking the ulti, and that was such a nice play. Follows up with the Q after that. Um, Whippo, I don't know. Game one was really rough, man. He just thinks Gragas is tanky or something. He's not. Uh, I don't know what to say about that. That was head scratchers. Back to what I said earlier when like tactical was inting and you kind of watch and you're like, I don't really know what he's going for. Kind of looked the same with Bwipo and the Gragas and died quite a bit. There was like 3 deaths where he just doesn't respect the damage and just dies. And then Hansama.
Yeah, oh god.
I guess he
He's
looked
just
better
hardcore
on the
choking.
Jinx, but it's a problem when you can't just put him on Zeri and 1v9. Like, I mean, I guess it's not exactly the most fair thing to be like, oh, look at Berserker, look at the best AD carry, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zeri was permaban the entire series, but you know, it's a little
But in the other
problematic when
series, he
you
was
don't.
not looking good on it, right?
Yeah, he wasn't.
and I think that's why it's
Hansama
perma banned.
hasn't been
I don't.
looking good. Let's just say that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was TL that was permanently banning it. I don't know, but I'm guessing it probably was. Who knows? Yeah, and those are the things to point out. I guess also Bjergsen's Talia was fucking clean.
Yeah.
Games 2 and 3, really good Talia. So that's about it for the players to shout out, I think.
Yeah. Super exciting weekend of playoff matches. I said it last week, but when world spots are on the line and we're kind of nearing towards the end of the season and teams are fighting for, world seed, whether you're, in the top two, you're fighting for number one or number two. It's super, super important, and it just always leads to exciting series. And just based on what we've seen so far, I expect the finals weekend to also be super exciting. I
Yeah,
don't foresee any 3-0 stomps, but said it last year and we saw two
you
3-0
never know,
stomps.
dude. Again, it's so hard to predict playoffs right now, man. It's so hard. Honestly, maybe it's not that hard. Just say 5 games, forehead, and move on.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move over to the postmortems now. We've got a long list of things to get into, so we'll do TSM last because obviously a long year for them. Let's start with TL since we were just talking about them. Look, they pretty much said if they don't make worlds, or what was it? If they don't make worlds, it's obviously a failure. But was it first or failure? Can you refresh my memory here?
I don't know if they said that themselves, but
Oh, definitely did. Steve said it many times, like that. I just don't remember exact wording or exactly where they wanted to finish. There was an interview recently with Travis that they did, like at the Alienware, whatever their new training facility is, and he was basically saying like this roster's meant to win.
and they didn't. About yeah,
I
it's just kind of funny to look back at the expectations that were set on this roster and go back and kind of look at the team's performances month to month because like I said when we were talking about TL and their series against EG, this team pretty much apart from lock-in of spring never even sat at the top of the standings really. You know,
yeah.
Cloud9 was at the top of the standings for spring split for the majority of the season. I think TL only regained sole possession of first place until the last week of LCS. And
Mm.
even then, they dropped to the lower bracket after facing off against 100 Thieves and then, got smashed 3-0 by EG. But the team that was, this is probably the most expensive roster that we've ever seen NA put together, one that was expected to win, one that was supposed to win, one that was supposed to be going to Worlds as very likely the number one seed doesn't even make it to Worlds. And
Yeah.
obviously, for players like Bwipo, Bjergsen, and Hansama, who came and joined this team, Hansama and Bwipo leaving the LEC to come over to this team, the super team, and Bjergsen coming out of retirement, choosing to leave TSM and join Team Liquid, those three players, they all had so much. They really didn't have a lot to gain, but a whole lot to lose, kind of based off the way that this kind of panned out. Obviously, we'll never know what the team looks like at their peak. But who knows whether this team would have gone to Worlds and would have made it to quarterfinals, semifinals, finals. But I think that was part of the expectations that were put on them. And we've just seen a bit of a trend in the past where you create these quote unquote super teams and you put these big labels and expectations on them, and almost all of them have failed. I was really trying to like think back to specifically NA and EU super teams that we're supposed to be the best team coming out of the region. We're supposed to go to Worlds. We're supposed to rep their respective region and do really well. And the ones to me that come to mind in NA was TSM in 2018. That was when they ditched Doublelift and got Sven Mithi and Mike Young because you had Bjergsen, who was still, the best player in the LCS.
Mm-hmm.
You had Hanser, who was the best top lane in the LCS at the time. You bring over Mike Young from Phoenix One, who was the biggest jungle prospect we'd kind of ever seen at the time
Yep.
and was just this highly touted rookie. Well, not a rookie because he was a rookie on P1. And
He
then you
was
bring,
he had rookie feel. It was kind of like Danny. Like I still look at Danny as a rookie, even though he's technically not. The kind of same kind of thing. Just obviously Danny panned out and Mike Young didn't.
yeah, and then you had the bot lane where they got rid of Doublelift and Biofrost and chose to import over Europe's best bot lane in Sven and Mithi. And that team they didn't make a single LCS finals. That was the first time the org had ever missed LCS finals. Didn't make the world championship, fell out in the losers bracket, or not the losers bracket, I guess, but the gauntlet at the time. I think both times to Clutch Gaming, lost in 5-game series. And then, the other NA super team that I think of is obviously this Team Liquid roster that failed. But you go over to EU, and I mean, there's a ton of them where that have been touted as super teams and they failed. There was Elements in 2015, which was like rebranded Alliance, and they bought out Reckless, who was the biggest prospect in Europe at the time. There was Misfits in 2019, where they had bought, Soaz from Fnatic, and they had Maxlor jungle, Senkux mid. They brought over Gorilla from the LCK, who was, at the time still a top tier support, had Hansama on that lineup. There was G2 in 2019, like, in 2019 and 2020, they were kind of considered a super team. That might be the most successful super team we've probably ever seen,
Yeah.
just because they went to Worlds Finals, lost
Yeah,
to
like that's not a
FPX.
failure. That's an absolute success of a super team,
Yeah,
honestly.
but it's funny. It's funny we say that because in 2021 they went the step further, kicking Perks and bringing in Reckless, and that was like, oh shit, this is the super team. And then that team also kind of fell flat on its face. Really never got out to a strong start in the summer split. They obviously had a really good spring split, but in summer, pretty much hung around fourth the entire time. Lost out to Fnatic for Worlds in the lower bracket over there. And you had Vitality this year in the LEC. You had massive players coming back over to EU from NA and Perks and Alfari. You had Self-Made Jungle, who has always been good on pretty much every team that he's ever played on. And then you had Carzzy coming over from Mad Lions. But, there just seems to be this trend with super teams where you put all this expectation on these teams and these players, and they seem to never meet those expectations.
And so, what do you think it is then, J&T?
Well,
Like, what is it about super teams in your mind that doesn't allow them to have success for the most part, right? We said the G2, like, there are instances of success, but there's a lot of instances of just pure disaster. Like, don't get me wrong, it's really bad with TL because they spent a bunch of money. But even like with Vitality, for example, they also spent a bunch of money, but they didn't even make playoffs, man.
yeah,
Bro.
yeah, that was pretty funny. But I mean, I think specifically with this TL roster, and I think it does sort of, you can kind of throw this in the basket with all these other super teams, is just when you have 5 players on a team who are all regarded as top in their position at that time, because you look at the CL roster, Bwipo has been one of the best top laners in the LEC in its history, came over. Santorin
Hmm.
has been one of the best junglers in North America for the last 3 years.
Yep.
Bjergsen, the GOAT of North America on the team.
Yep.
Hansama, the best performing European AD carry, maybe you could even say
He was
Western
so good
player.
last year.
You
I
could
would
maybe even say Western player at Worlds, or not at Worlds, but just in general.
last year you're talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it. I would have to think about it more, but probably.
And then Core JJ, who, I mean, we've known for such a long time now in the LCS, has been the best support in the league. And I think just when you have these
Yeah.
expectations of all these 5 players, also, since they're top players in their respective roles, normally in previous teams have existed as the carry, you really have to sort of change and create a completely different team identity to what they're probably used to on their previous teams. Because, I mean, when you see your normal best team, whether it's LPL, LCK, LEC, LCS, there is, for the most part, a clear identity of these are the carry players or these are the best players on the team, and the other players play a more supportive role. We saw that with Damwon when they were really, really good, and I mean, they're not, I mean, they're still good. They're going to Worlds this year, but in Season 10 and Season 11, Showmaker, Canyon, Nuguri slash Khan were the carries of this team, and their bot lane, for the most part, in Ghost and Barrel, were playing the more supportive role and were sort of designed to facilitate the rest of the team. And then you look at maybe, the previous iterations of Team Liquid when Doublelift was on the roster. And it was all about player on Doublelift. And, the rest of the team was kind of doing what they could to support him and prop him up in any way, shape, or form. And obviously, that one-dimensional play style didn't necessarily work out for them in international tournaments. But I think with super teams, you often find a lack of identity. I mean, it sometimes can be a bit difficult to figure out what player you want to play around. Team Liquid even said it themselves in the spring to summer off season, was that they tried to do too many things in spring split. And I think while they kind of solved some of those issues in summer, we still saw them, trying out so many different things and failing on these completely different kind of style team comps. We saw the games where Hansama was to carry. That one game in the regular season where they built the whole comp around Hansama. He was playing Lucian, they had Bjergsen on the Zillion, and if Hansama chokes or messes up in team fights, the game's over. And we saw games even in the CLG series this past weekend where it's all around play around top lane. We're diving top lane with Bwipo. They fail to play and the game just completely goes awry. And when you add that extra pressure of, okay, now Worlds is on the line, we're in the lower bracket, choking is like a real thing. And you saw a lot of choking going on from Team Liquid this weekend specifically. I think mainly in their bot lane. Onsama and Core DJ were just making so many basic fundamental mistakes, whether it's just like not pressing flash or misjudging skill shots and how much damage you're taking in team fights and positioning, like whatever it may be. But you add the pressure of this team's supposed to do well, it's supposed to succeed, and they're not doing well. Plus, how do we actually really figure out a way to play as a team? And it kind of just is a recipe for disaster.
And so I want to go with something Bwipo said in one of his interviews. He mentioned how like when you have fresh rookies, you have players that are a lot more like malleable, and like
Exactly, yeah, I remember
you're
that.
able to get them to play like a more adaptive style to whatever whatever is meta at the time or whatever it is. Whereas like a lot of players are set in their ways if they're like longtime players. And while there definitely can be some truth to that, I don't know if that fully explains the reason for why super teams fail. I think that could be a part of it, but like I guess let me just use the example of what we've seen lately out of like Core JJ, for example. Definitely not playing at his peak, right? Is it because the players on his team aren't malleable that like he's getting caught basing in really bad spots? Like last week it was the Yumi and then they give up the Baron. This week he's sitting in the brush and then like Hans dies by trying to let him get his base off. Like that has nothing to do, like those really, really bad mistakes have nothing to do with like who your teammates are or what champions they're playing. Like those are just stupid bad mistakes. And so that's why I don't, while I think there's some truth to what Bwipo is saying, to me, it doesn't fully explain what went wrong with TL. And I don't think it's easy to put your finger on what the issue is, because if it was that easy, you'd be able to build a super team and have success with it, right? Like we would have known before the year started that the super team wouldn't have worked out. But it's not easy to figure out, and that's why we all predicted them to win the both splits probably, because we thought, well, you know what, even if it is, we have seen a lot of super teams fail, these guys are still all really good players and we still expect them to perform well. It just for some reason never came together. And I don't think it's ever going to be as simple as, oh, it's because of this or oh, it's because of that. I don't know why Bwipo thought Gragas was tankier with that build, but he wasn't. And that has nothing to do with what players are on his team. So I don't know. I honestly, and at the end of the day, me personally, I have no idea why
I,
super teams fail.
I
Yes, I
guess
think there's some truth to what Bwipo said, but I think there's a lot of contributing factors.
Yeah, I guess what I would say in terms of, specific instances of, like you said, it's not necessarily like the team focus. Like obviously Team Liquid was making a lot of individual errors in in a ton of their series across this entire playoff run. But I think part of that is because when you haven't really figured out the best way to play as a team and you're really unsure of what you need to be doing, in the mid and late game, you can kind of reach and people can kind of, they can go a little one step too far, like, but was playing a little bit too aggressive or Core is, Hansama, their positioning, whatever. I just think that when you're looking for answers as a team and you're struggling as a team, that can then lead you to do some, to make some of those unforced errors because,
Yeah, there's pressure. Like there's a lot of
exactly.
pressure on you. I could totally see that argument for sure.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, I would say that the main thing when it comes to super teams is the pressure and the expectation that gets put on them more often than not is what causes the team to collapse and fail.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it could just be that simple, right? But
I mean, it's not
I
that
don't think
simple,
that
but I think that's like one answer that you can point to that has like a decent
some
percentage of
reasoning behind
truth.
it. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. But yeah, like I said, I don't think there's ever going to be this obvious reason, and I think that's one of the struggles with super teams and why I don't think they're going to completely go away. But I do definitely think you're going to see a lot less of them. I still think eventually there's going to be some team that has money and has the opportunity to get so many good players, and I still think they're going to take it. I don't know if that's this year or in years to come, but I don't think this is the last super team we've seen. I think we will see it again. It's just a matter of when,
One
if you ask
thing,
me.
one thing that I will say about that, because LS has made this point a couple times on his co-streams, is that when you see a lot of these super teams, specifically in NA, where the salaries are very, very high,
Hmm.
NA salary is much greater than the European salary. And when these super teams are, regardless of if it's a super team or not, when you invest a lot of money in a starting roster and it inevitably fails, like, TSM last year, Team Liquid this year, I guess now, it can potentially have some long-term effects on the league where orgs don't, put that orgs might potentially not put that same value in paying for these high tier players if there's the possibility that it's all going to crash and burn. And I think that was a good thing to note that LS was making, just because this could have some long term effects, maybe on how much money is being paid out in North America, just because how expensive this roster was. I think the word on the street was that this roster is like $7 million.
Yeah, that's the rumor.
Yeah, and I mean,
I
we do.
wonder how much of that is with incentives, though, right? Like, if you're signing this roster and you're paying that much money, I'm telling you, the contract that I'm writing up, if I'm Steve on the Steve side of things, is like, you better freaking make worlds, and then you'll get your bonuses or whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I guess at the same time though, people running it like with this whole super team thing is you have that expectation, so you potentially may
Yeah.
not feel the need to add those things in because it's like, well, obviously we're gonna make worlds. Like, look at these players I fucking have on my team.
And like the reason why TL, I mean, I think TL always spends a lot of money, but the reason why I think they can go out and spend this much money this year is because Worlds is in NA, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, and so obviously it's worth spending for the year that that Worlds is here. It's just sad that they're not going to get to use that investment or get the full amount of value out of that investment. But it wouldn't surprise me if Steve actually technically saved some money, purely speculatory for the record. But it wouldn't surprise me if he saved some money as far as like incentives go, because I mean, wouldn't you be like, make worlds and then you'll get this bonus rather than just saying, here, you get $2 million a year or whatever it is for a player? You'd be like, do you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I get what you're saying. I would just personally think that incentives are probably something that's utilized more often in the lower tier teams in the LCS.
Really?
I mean, I would imagine that.
I think it would be universal against just any team. Like, hey, you get a bonus if you go to this far or whatever. Maybe not.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I would just think that those things may have greater importance in, when it comes to signing contracts on lower tier teams, because you're probably not getting paid too much to be on a CLG or Immortals. However, if it's in your contract where, oh, like, we're supposed to be a bad team, but if you make playoffs, boom, X bonus.
I should really maybe try to. The next time I'm on Hotline League, I should ask Mark or Travis if they know about how often contracts have incentives or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Feel like they might know. Anyways, with the postmortem, as we always do, we try to give a score of 1 to 10 coming into the year. So, we'll kind of talking from Steve's point of view in this case, of like 1, you're absolutely devastated, which obviously it might just be a 1, or 10, you're really happy with how the year went. Coming into the year, TL, what kind of score do you give him, J&T, from 1 to 10?
It's got to be a one, straight up one. Has to be a
Yeah,
one.
I usually, a lot of the times, what I'll do is like, well, it could be worse, so I'll give him a 2. No, 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 no.
I
No,
mean,
in
it
this case,
could be worse. They could have been last place LCS,
still
whatever,
though,
but
it's still a
exact,
1,
yeah,
right?
it's a
It's
one.
still a 1. Yeah,
Yeah.
because even just going 3rd place and going to Worlds is a little disappointing for them. Like, if they made it to World, I'd probably give them like a 4 or a 5, because this team was meant to win. They didn't do that, and they didn't even make Worlds, so they didn't even make top 3. And not only that, Steve hates coming in 4th.
Yeah.
That's the old TL meme, is finishing 4th. He's back to where he was, I don't even know how many years ago. And so, yeah, it's a 1.
However, this is the part of the show where I get to introduce my spicy prediction
Ooh,
for
here we go.
Team
Spicy
Liquid.
prediction. Okay, feed me.
I just have this feeling that Han Sama's continuous inting in the playoffs and towards the end of the summer split has, I feel like it's just going to pave the way for Doublelift to come back. I feel
Really?
like, I don't know. I just
I
have a
don't think
feeling that
so.
it's going to happen. I
So
think that if
if
I were.
you're right, more power to you. That we'll have to like remember this. If you're right, like, you'll remember it, right? And we could
Hmm.
call back to it and be like, I called it and you said I was wrong. Here's why I'm saying you're wrong, J&T. We just saw TL spend a shit ton of money and not finish well at all. You and I know very well that like Doublelift did not look good his last split of the when he was playing, and he's been on break for quite some time now. I think that would be really, really troll. I know there's the whole Steve message him like check DMs or whatever after. I think that was just memes. Like Steve's a memer.
Yeah,
I
no,
think that
that
was just
that that was my prediction has nothing to do with that. I mean, that
okay.
was
Good.
clearly just a meme, but
Yeah. Okay.
I don't
Good.
know. I think the opportunity because I mean, if I had to guess, Bwipo and Hansama are not going to stick around. I highly doubt that both Bwipo and Hansama are
Yeah.
going to
Those
play for
to
Team
me are the
Liquid.
obvious throw out. To
Yeah,
me.
I think we're going to see the exact same situation that we saw with Perks and Alfari in last year, where they come over for a little 1 year thing. They try to go make worlds and make semifinals, quarterfinals, whatever, and then they're going to go back to Europe because I think there's a lot of spots open in the LEC. I think Wibo, if you want to talk about top teams, he could probably go on Mad Lions. He's probably better than Armut. Um, 80
Here's my
carries.
prediction.
There's a
I
lot
got a
of 80
prediction
carries.
for you.
Hansam is still a pretty good 80 carry. I think he could go to EU. But if I had to guess, if I had to make my bold prediction, it would be that double lift will rejoin TL. They'll probably keep core. It'll be core double, Bjergsen, Santorin, and they'll import a top, I would assume, whether it's a Korean top or a Chinese top or maybe
And
it's
see,
just a
that's
European
still
top.
a
But
really expensive roster. And I'm not saying that they won't do that as
I
far
don't
as
I don't
keeping
think you have
jungle,
to
mid,
pay
and
double lift.
support.
I do not think that double lift will be making more than Hansama was making last year. No shot.
I don't see. I think Doublift will stay doing what he's doing, but I mean, we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Um, I think if there is one player you keep, I actually think it's just Santorin. Now, maybe you keep Yerksen as well. I could see them doing that, but like, it's hard to justify getting rid of Core as well, right? Like, it's very, very interesting. I think Core's contract is up. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's up. Um, it's like it's hard to justify almost anything you do outside of letting go of Whippo and Hans.
I think I, if I had to guess, I would think that they're going to hold on to Santorin, Bjergsen, and Core
Yeah.
JJ. I think they're just going to get rid of Bwipo and Hansama, and most likely import. If not, if
What
Double's
about
not
just
going to
their
come.
academy? Didn't their academy team win or something? Proving Grounds? We don't ever follow Proving Grounds at all. Someone let us know in comments if they won Proving Grounds or something.
I
Or
think
maybe
they
you can look it
I
up.
think they did,
I don't
but
know.
I mean I don't think Bradley is getting in there anytime soon, and I doubt Jan is going to get in there either. So
You don't know anything about Bradley. You just don't like the name Bradley because you said it like that.
I don't know anything about him, but I doubt he's
Yeah.
going into Team Liquid, who's supposed to be a top team in the league.
I
They're,
mean, you never know.
Team Liquid is not the team to put in academy players on their LCS roster. They
After spending $7 million on a team that doesn't make worlds, maybe they are.
well
Maybe.
they spent a shit ton of money on a roster in season 9 and then season 10 after they failed at Worlds. Like season
Yeah.
8 when they were the number 1 team in the league, failed to make it out of groups. We already thought they had a good team. Guess what? They picked up Jensen Core JJ. Oh
No,
wait, next
you're
year, guess
absolutely
what?
right.
Fuck Smithy, we're buying out Broxo. Like, dude, these guys spend money on the reg. They are not ones to
No,
sub an
you're
academy.
absolutely right that that's what they've done in the past. However, I think this is like the most extreme circumstance where they've spent more than anyone ever has in NA. I think, so that's why I think this is a little bit more extreme, and maybe that changes. But yeah, no, you're right. That is what they've done. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. Last thing I'll say, because we've gone on for quite some time on the TL postmortem, is there's a world where Jensen was the AD carry for this team,
Yeah.
and there's a world where C9 doesn't have Jensen.
I mean, there
Which
was a
I guess
world
real
where
quick,
Bjergsen was going to be on C9.
yeah, real quick, if TL had Jensen instead of Hans, who do you think would be the mid for C9? I know we're getting into the
Um,
weeds here a little bit.
I don't know, maybe their academy mid copy. Apparently, he's
What
pretty
about
good.
Niski? Do
Nah,
you think they would have outbid?
nah, I don't think so.
No. You think Niski just wanted to stay in EU? I mean, Niski,
Probably.
because here's like Niski would have been playing with Blabber again, a lot of success there. Sven, I think he played with
Yep.
he was playing with Fudge as well, right?
Nope. He
No.
was just with Licorice.
Licorice. Okay. Now, I want you to help refresh my memory here because maybe I'm just forgetting. Was there any like bad terms or anything when Niski left C9? Like what happened
No,
there? It
it
was
was
just they just wanted perks and that was
yeah,
it?
they wanted perks.
Okay.
And I mean, Niski had a bad end to the year,
Did
so
he? So
yeah.
that's the stuff that I don't remember. That's why I'm asking you. I know that you
He,
would remember the
him and
C9
him and
stuff.
him and Blabber were running it down. So
Okay. Anyways, it would just be interesting. It's an interesting world to think of, but yeah, I don't want to get too much further into the weeds. Let's go CLG now. Postmortem for CLG. coming into the year, you're just hoping to not be bottom two, right? Just make some playoffs. And obviously, they did not look good in spring, but then summer comes around and they actually are a respectable team. It looks like everything's going to completely fall apart in playoffs, but they win. Do they went to 5 against
Golden Guardians.
what did they do? They went to 5 against Golden Guardians. What did they do against was it
Cloud9, yeah,
C9?
they played Cloud9 first. They
To 5?
lost 3, yeah, they lost 3-2.
Yeah. So you go 5 games against Cloud9, who's looking like the best team right now, and then you go 5 games against Golden. The point is they won the series. To me, it would have been pure disaster if they just flopped out in playoffs. But they remained competitive. They went to 5 against TL as well. Like huge success. I think I would probably give them a 9, honestly. Coming into the year of just how happy are you with how the season went? It's got to be up there. Probably a 9 because I think if you make Worlds 10, but very, very good out of them, probably give them a 9.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually the post-mortems are usually kind of depressing because
Yeah,
it's usually dog shit team finishes dead last, and then it's, oh, semi-decent team flames out of playoffs, and unless you're the team who wins the split, you probably thought that you were going to win the split, so your expectations aren't that great. But with CLG, like you said at the beginning, the goal of summer was to not be a dog shit team, and
yep,
they were actually a really good team. They won
yep.
coaching staff with the split. Contracts was the most improved player. This roster, for whatever reason already, feels to be like the one roster that may not make any changes going into next year.
I could
If
see
I'm
that.
CLG, I would still do my due diligence and maybe see what possibilities are out there. If I had to peg anybody to get replaced, it would probably be Dokla, maybe. Um,
Mm.
and I only
Which is
say
weird to
that
say, right? But
I,
I could see why you say it.
I only say that because I don't think he has. I mean, okay, I guess I'll backtrack a sec. The best performers, in my opinion, on CLG were Contracts and Palafox. And Palafox was a player that I personally thought you should give up on, but I think he actually did enough and had a really, really strong summer split to warrant sticking around for next year. Same with Contracts. And I just don't think that Dokla has the same upside as Luger and Poom do. And I think that Dokla's problems that he's been known for his entire career are still there. And not to say that I don't think that CLG could be a good team with the same roster, because I think they can be a good team with the same roster. I just think if there's a possibility to upgrade anywhere, it would be at the top lane position. Um, and I think that's what would make the most sense.
If it's
However,
you though, would you stick with them or would you look for someone else? If it's you,
I would see what's
if you're
available.
GM,
Uh,
I would
It's
stick with them. You always need to see who's available, but my gut instinct is I would stick with them.
Yeah, I mean, if like it's hard to say because we don't know what top laners are available, but if there was somebody at the level of an impact or something available, I would probably try to get him.
I would say the thing is too is that we only just saw one split out of him being back in the LCS. Like to me, like still give him more time to continue to ramp up. You know what it kind of reminds me of? I think this is applicable to anyone who's grinded ladder before, whether it's silver, gold, plat, whatever. If let's say you're like silver 3, for example, and you go on a huge win streak, right? Like Dokla starts off, he's on fire at the start of summer, right? And he's absolutely 1v9 in games. He's a monster. And you start to win and you just push right up to silver 1 and then you like convince yourself like, "Oh, I'm getting better at this game." Or maybe you're plat 3 and you're going up to plat 1, you're like, "Oh, I'm actually getting good at this game." And then like as soon as you've convinced yourself that you're good, it kind of settles in where you start to lose some and it kind of evens out. Like it's always a slow, you never just climb straight up. It never works that way in solo queue. And that's kind of what I think we saw at Adokla this split was he had a huge resurgence and then kind of came back down a little bit. And that's just like you slowly go up. I think that's kind of just how it is. And I wouldn't give up on a player that to me still obviously showed improvement. Obviously. So just because he regressed a little bit towards the end of summer isn't a big enough reason for me to say let go of him and go someone else. I think you stay the course, and obviously you could have a backup plan if you have somebody else in academy that you think is promising as well. But for me, I think he's still slowly climbing up, and he's about to make that silver 1 or gold 1 or plat 1 jump to the next rank. That's very much what it feels like to me.
Okay, well, I'll just give you an example then. If CLG could sign Impact at a reasonable price, you didn't have to overpay for him, would you stick with Dokla or would you take Impact?
I think taking impact is the very CLG of old thing to do, where they sign these players that have also regressed. Like, don't get me wrong, Impact I still think is a good top laner, but I've mentioned in past episodes he's not C9 Impact, he's not TL Impact. I think EG Impact is definitely a step below. And I think that's kind of what we saw when they signed players like Pobelter, for example. That was kind of towards the end of their career, and maybe Impact still has a long way to go. You never know. He's been playing the game for a long, long time. But to me, that would be the very CLG of old thing to do, which is a big mistake in my mind of going after players when they're heading in the wrong direction. I think Dokla coming back for one split and looking much, much better is in the right direction, even if towards the end of summer there was some regression there.
Okay, okay. Get
So I would
behind that.
not go for Impact, honestly.
I think I would, but
That's like going
it's
for Smoothie
close.
and
It's very
Broxa and
close.
Pobelter and Turtle.
Okay,
Like
but Smoothie is okay. I think there's a difference between some of the players you're naming and then
there
Impact.
is, but I think you get my point,
I
right?
get your point, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Alrighty. You saved the best for last.
Oh boy, buckle up, listeners, because well, who's going through the list? Do you want me to go through the list, or do you want to read out the long list? We're going to revise all of this year from TSM, or just at least what we remember. We've made a long list of like the things because there's so much that happened with TSM this year that we had to make a huge list of things that we don't forget anything. If we do forget something, definitely leave it in the comments because there was a lot. Jamesy,
Yeah,
do you want to read out the list?
I'll read it out, I guess, just to set the scene a little bit at the beginning of the timeline. So we're starting from basically this is like September, October of 2021 when the off season starts for TSM because obviously they missed out on Worlds last year. Kind of a
Yeah.
disappointment, especially considering how much they spent on the roster, primarily with the Sword Art acquisition. But, you know, first thing that came out was that Bjergsen was retiring. It was like, oh my God, Poggers, Bjergsen back. Guess what? He's leaving the team. So, Bjergsen retires, leaves TSM. Not too long after, there's this big Doublelift and Reginald drama where Doublelift's flaming Reggie over, his stream, leaves TSM as a streamer. There was even rumors that he was potentially going to rejoin the team or was looking at LCS options that off season and had, the relationship was obviously, too fucked to continue and to even have
Yeah.
TSM as a potential option. Quickly left the building. But
And then says like, yeah, Reggie's also an asshole and bullies his players, and then that started an investigation.
yeah, there's investigations launched into TSM, one internally and one led by Riot. Uh, January 2022, kind of at the start of the LCS season, Parth, the longtime GM, leaves the team. And then obviously, the story in Spring Split. TSM is just last placed the entire year except for the last week where they moved up to ninth place. They bring in the LPL duo of Shenyi and Kaiduo. They both get benched relatively quickly into their LCS career. Shenyi is flaming tactical on stream, and TSM kind of notes that, plus some motivational issues as reason to bench him.
And he also locked in something on stage
Yeah,
without coach permission, I
yeah.
think.
Oh, Jesus, dude, it's
Which
such
we
a shit
found out like
show.
a month later or 2 weeks later or something.
Yeah, and then, Spica kind of gave that infamous interview with Travis Gafford where he says, like, I just wish I could jungle and not have to deal with all the drama
I think that
surrounding
was a tweet.
TSM.
I think that was just a tweet.
Yeah, I think he might have touched on it in an interview as well,
Oh,
but
maybe he did. Yeah, maybe he did. Sorry, carry
either
on.
way, their star player, comes out and talks about the problems that the team's having internally and all these issues we hear about in like the league Twitterverse or Doublelift leaking stuff on stream, whatever. And then we had the secondary banger of Peter Zhang getting investigated and subsequently fired for, his conflict of interest with signing these LPL players and taking a
Oh
percentage of
man,
their salary. There was
that
some
was a mess.
there was definitely some tomfoolery going on.
Yeah.
As I said before, TSM was last or ninth, but they missed playoffs for the first time in LCS history. You know, spring to summer off season comes around. They revamp the roster a little bit. They add Maple from PSG Talent, bring in Mia, another support that they were considering to compete with Shenyi for the starting spot. But guess what? They released Kaido. They released Shenyi like right at the beginning of the split. Um, in the middle of the split, Doublelift revealed that Reggie threatened to sue him back in the drama at the beginning of the season. There's that Washington Post article that is released, talking about TSM and how they have like a culture of fear and employees are afraid to speak out in this whole contract versus employee situation where they're not paying their employees properly and Jesus, I mean, and then
I don't
TSM.
remember that part. The employees not getting paid. I don't remember that.
Remember the whole contract worker versus employee situation that was going
Oh
on?
yes, this is coming back to me a little bit now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there was
something
like
about that.
past
I don't remember
TSM
the specifics.
employees on Twitter,
Yeah.
talking about how they didn't get paid properly or they didn't receive
Okay.
proper benefits, whatever.
Yeah, something like that. Okay.
Back to the actual League of Legends stuff. They fucking blow up the roster. Huni retires. Tactical and Mia get benched. They bring over Instinct and Chime. Soul is in the team for 2 weeks. Then he steps down because he wants the team to do well. Solo, comes in for emergency services. And dude, keep in mind, we're still in the middle of the summer split. There's now rumors that TSM wants to leave the LCS, and there was rumored interest in the Misfits slot and the Astralis slots, and then we saw last weekend, they got knocked out of Worlds contention. It was a fucking roller coaster this year with TSM. I mean, that was what, like 4 minutes of just spewing information of everything that has happened since
Oh,
November
and
or
we might not
October of
even be done.
2021.
We might not even be done. So just wait, right? Because now that the season's over, there might be more to come out, right? There's
Oh
a
yeah,
good chance we won't be surprised if next week we're talking about TSM. That
yeah.
there was like a month straight of episodes where all of our main topics were TSM and what new drama happened this time. It is crazy, that long list of stuff, and we might have missed something. Again, reminder: if there's something that we missed, let us know in the comments, please, because it is amazing. It is amazing what this year was. This is a team that is obviously supposed to go. Like the idea behind TSM is winning NA isn't good enough, and I mean they've kind of gotten away from that after the whole Doublelift leaving debacle, or after them getting rid of Doublelift. But for the longest time, they wanted international success. They can't even bro. There was discussions about them being the new CLG, which I guess I've come to the realization, JNT, that I could say they are not the new CLG, although I can definitely see that they got close. But I guess winning a playoff series gets them out of that.
Yeah, I mean, winning a playoff series against who the fuck did they beat? FlyQuest? Like,
FlyQuest,
who gives
yeah.
a fuck?
But that's still that's not what CLG was, right? So ultimately, they are not the new CLG, although definitely reasons to XD this team all year long. The score is obviously a 1. Anyone on TSM who is happy at all with just winning a playoff series, you're crazy. This is not what this year was supposed to be. You had I mean, what 13 players they had for TSM?
Yeah,
That
they
is
had
not
they had
it, man.
13 different players play in LCS at any given point, whether if it was one game, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That's that's a lot of
And look,
players.
and there's a lot of negative that happens, so I don't want to completely gloss over Chime looking really good. There are some things to be happy for going into next year, right? But still, from what TSM's expectation, it's definitely a 1 out of 10. So you got Chime that looked good though. You had Solo, who's like a firefighter. He just puts out fires on any team, basically. He's kind of what happened. I mean, let's be honest. The rumors are that he starts a lot of fires when he starts on a roster, but when he's coming in to take over, it seems like no issues there. Um, so there are some good things, right, from TSM, but
There's a
it's just
couple,
totally
but
clouded by a disaster of a year.
yeah, and even despite the good things that happened, even with the performances that picked up throughout the end to the summer split and part of their playoff run is, I mean, it's really unlikely that this roster is going to be together at all. I mean, I doubt that Solo is going to continue to be on the team. He provided his
Agreed.
emergency services. He'll be gone. I doubt that Maple is going to be around. I presume he's just going to go back to PCS
You
somewhere.
think Spica wants out? I think Spica wants
Well,
out.
and that's kind of where I was going to, but Spica, while they didn't necessarily have a as bad of a performance in summer as they did as spring, just all the drama that surrounds with being on TSM can potentially push a player like Spica out, one who
Hmm.
clearly is performing at a decent level, is the best player on your team, is kind of the face of your franchise at this point, in terms of like personality, whatever. You're giving him a lot of reasons to want to leave, and that's a big problem. The only player that you could really point to who for sure might be on TSM next year, but like I said, might be, is Chime. Um,
Yeah,
Chime performed pretty admirably, considering that he had a horrible first year in LCS or first split in LCS last year with Golden Guardians. Was on Golden Guardians Academy for spring and the beginning of summer. Comes over to TSM and actually looks pretty good. And
agreed.
despite his strong performances, I still think that it's very likely for TSM to want to blow it up and start over again and try to potentially buy out some good players, and that could include support.
Maybe TSM's the next team to have a super team.
Lamau.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that Chime gets a shot somewhere. I would like to see him get another shot in the LCS. I don't know which team that would be for, not at the moment anyways, but I hope to see him get another shot. Um, he'll for sure get an academy spot at the very least. You have to imagine.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
would think
I have
so.
no idea what TSM is going to do. No idea, and it's too hard to predict at this point. Because at this point last year, they were kind of saying, not this point last year, but around sometime, they were saying that like they wanted to kind of be the LPL version of LCS, where like they had the Peter Zhang connections. When they would look for LPL talent or LDL talent, I guess. I don't know if that's still their game plan after letting go of Peter Zhang and after all those issues. It's kind of hard to know where this team's going to go.
Yeah.
Big question mark, honestly, with
If I
TSM.
didn't say it already, I agree with you. It's a 1.
Yeah. And that was a long list of things. And again, we still might have missed some. So yeah. But
Yeah.
that was the year. Banger year TSM. I hope you got more for us next week. Okay. Let's get into the LCS finals weekend. We got that approaching. That is this weekend coming up, right?
Yep.
Or is there a week off?
Nope. In Chicago, 10th and
Okay.
11th.
Beast.
Uh,
100 Thieves versus EG, not the matchup we were expecting, or at least not for me, anyways. I fully expected. So first of all, I didn't even expect C9 to be going to Worlds. Obviously, that changed in the last couple of weeks. We've seen them really improve. But then they took out 100 Thieves, who is still, I think, my pick to take it all. As crazy as that might sound, so I guess I have to say I'm going with 100 Thieves over EG. What do you think, J&T? Am I too in love with 100 Thieves, or what are you thinking?
no, I'm rolling with 100 Thieves as well. They still looked pretty solid against Cloud9, despite the
Yep.
3-1 defeat. Once again, I will continue to say consistency is king with 100 Thieves. EG has had some really shaky performances from individuals on a game-to-game basis,
Yep.
whereas I don't think that's been the case for 100 Thieves. The only one that, like I said, I pointed to earlier was Someday. Had a pretty bad series against Fudge. I don't expect him to come out that flat again, and I don't expect 100 Thieves to implement the same game plan against Cloud9 or even EG with let's just blind pick Aatrox and see what Fudge can play into us, because that
Mm-hmm.
strategy did not work, and I think we're definitely going to see more resources put into Someday both in draft and in game.
Let me see.
I'm going
Yeah,
100 Thieves
I could see
3-2.
that. Yeah, I'm gonna go 3-1. Maybe I should just go 3-2. All the games have been going. All the series have been going 5 games. I am a little bit worried for EG. Um, it was really nice to see JoJo pop off. It was also really nice to see Impact look better than what we've seen mostly out of him out of summer. His GP games were kind of nice. It was nice to see him get the pentakill as well. But I still don't have that much confidence that someday won't top gap there. Um, I guess the you have to give the advantage to Inspired still over Closer, even though I think Closer is great. I can't ignore that Inspired was the MVP. That hasn't been lost on me. And again, back to the argument that I just don't see any holes in the 100 Thieves lineup. That's my issue. Yes, I said that earlier there was some holes in draft, and I guess I don't like Abadage on some picks, but I think it's very difficult to regularly get him off of those 3 picks of Ari, Azir, and Talia, like I mentioned earlier. And there might be other ones that I think he looks good on as well, but just those, I think it's very difficult to get him off those picks. And so even though we did see C9 beat them, I still don't see any obvious holes in the lineup, so I can't bet against 100 Thieves.
I agree.
So 3-1 for them. And then we got C9 in the finals. Do you have C9 taking it now, or are you sold?
Yep, I'm
Yeah.
sold.
I'm
I
not surprised by that. And I don't even blame you for that necessarily. I don't agree. Um But I could definitely see a world where you predict C9. They're looking really, really good right now.
Yeah, it's
I, I
it's hard to ignore the lackluster summer split that they had, but it's also hard to ignore the performances that they've had in the playoffs so far, which have spanned a total of
yeah,
11 games. Obviously not the cleanest series against CLG, but once again, we kind of saw the individual prowess of C9's players, something that was very, very lacking in the summer split,
yeah,
because when Cloud9 was winning games in the summer split, it did feel like it was more of that reactive, punishing opponents' mistakes rather than you going out, accruing the leads yourself, and just snowballing the game over. And even in their losses and wins against CLG, we really saw the, like I said, individual prowess from specifically their solo laners in Fudge and Jensen. I think to me, that has been the biggest reason why Cloud9 is looking so much better, is both of them are playing like they are 10 times better than their opponents. They're smashing their lanes. I don't think Blabber is doing anything special. I know a lot of people do want to point to Blabber's like, oh my God, Blabber's back to being a beast. I just think that his job has just been so easy the last couple of games. Obviously, don't get me wrong, he's been making some crazy plays and has been having great engages. He pointed to the one where he stopwatched at 10% HP and then is flashing into the enemy backline to get a 3-man Wukong ult. But, you know, he's playing really, really solid, having some great objective control. He's had a couple smite steals himself. But I just think that Cloud9 is looking so, so good right now. They have
Yeah.
all the momentum on their side. I see it kind of similarly to how EG was looking in the spring playoffs, where they're just starting to roll through everybody. And
I
I think
would
they'll do
take
the same.
C9 over EG though. If EG beat 100, I would take C9 over them.
Yeah,
So I
so
guess my tier list, if you will, is still 100, then C9, then EG. Even
yeah,
though C9 just beat 100, I think that's the way. I think 100 Thieves adapts and overcomes them in finals. But just one thing to argue for C9. I remember saying something last week about like talking about Jensen at Worlds last year, and I remember saying like it's not just oh I'm at Worlds now I'm going to look good. It's more to me about when the games start to matter is when he turns it on. So I consider that to be whether it's Worlds or whether it's playoffs, and we're seeing that as well. That's like Jensen had an okay summer split, I would say. He's had a really good playoff, and so
yeah.
just to argue a little bit for the C9 side of things, he's looking pretty damn good in playoffs. So I don't think that by any means Abidage's got a free lane there, which I think Abidage probably would have clapped him if it was midsummer right now.
Yeah, I mean, history actually says that Jensen kind of shits on Abadage. So I think regardless, I think Jensen normally gets the upper hand of him.
Okay.
Upper hand over him. I do think that's partly because Jensen, he's pretty much the only one in the LCS right now that is blind picking LeBlanc. He's done that. He did that during the summer split, and he's been doing it the entire playoffs. He just,
His LeBlanc is terrifying, man.
yeah, he just doesn't give a fuck with his LeBlanc. He'll just literally blind pick it into any matchup, whether it's a Z or Ari, even if they go counter pick Vex. That was the one game that Cloud9 beat 100 Thieves in regular season was Jensen blind pick LeBlanc, and they went counter pick Vex, and Abadage still got shit on. So I don't know.
And then
I think the champion pools are just like perfectly aligning for Cloud9 with these random dumbass top lane blind picks of Ornn and Aatrox that Fudge is just willing to play Fiora, Camille, Kennen into. Blabber, he's got his classic early game champions in Sejuani, Trundle, even Xin we're seeing a little bit nowadays in the meta. Jensen control mages plus LeBlanc. Berserker hyper carries, and then is just playing Mr. Kitten Enchanter. So
okay. And so if that series does happen, C9 versus 100, do you want to give a score line?
yeah, 3-1, probably C9.
And if it's C9 EG?
Well, that's not okay. Yeah, I guess if I had to pick, I'll probably
I
pick
mean, we're doing
C9.
hypotheticals here, I
Yeah,
know, but
probably another 3-1 C9's favor.
okay. If it's 100 C9, I'm giving 3-2 100. If it's C9 EG, I'm going 3-1 C9.
Okay, okay.
Okay, let's get to the world's updates. Spoiler alert here, in case you haven't watched the other regions, but JNT is going to go through a long list of stuff. Try to get through this as quick as possible, JNT, because this is a long list.
Yeah, we do have a lot.
But yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah,
Go for
LPL,
it.
the LPL playoffs just wrapped up not too long ago. Both the playoffs and the regional qualifiers, and this is how it looks. Gen G, #1 seed. Top Esports, #2 seed. EDG, #3 seed. Those three teams are all auto-seeded to the main stage. Lastly, RNG made it into the play-ins as the 4th seed. They beat out LNG in a 5-game series. I believe it was last night, so no Worlds for Doinby, unfortunately. Funny thing, I'll just say it right now because we'll talk about Mad Lions in a sec, but LNG didn't make Worlds and won 7 best of 5s over the course of 2022, and Mad Lions have not won a single best of 5 in 2022, and they're at Worlds. So
Interesting.
another discussion about formatting for playoffs around the world and whatever, and yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
let's not do that
Won't get
now.
into it, but the LCK up next. The LCK finished up. They finished up their playoffs not too, a little while ago, but they just finished up the regional qualifier. Genji, #1 seed. T1, #2 seed. Damwon, #3 seed. Those all three teams are in the main stage, and then DRX beat out Liv Sandbox for the remaining play-in spot.
Okay.
Now, the
LEC.
LEC and the LCS is where it gets a bit interesting because we still have the finals weekends for both of these. So the LEC, G2 at the very least is already going to be auto qualified to the main stage as the #2 seed. And then Fnatic and Rogue at the very least have qualified to the play-in stage, with one of those two teams potentially being able to push up into the second spot, which is a main seed spot. In the
Okay.
LCS, similarly, Cloud9, they've at least secured the number 2 seed for NA, which is auto-seeded to the main stage. 100 Thieves and EG have at least qualified number 3, with the winner of that first Saturday matchup is going to be going up to at least number 2.
Yep.
To then some of our smaller regions, but still pretty good region. VCS, Gigabyte Marines, number 1. If people don't remember, Gigabyte Marines actually didn't attend MSI 2022 despite being the number 1 seed out of the VCS because it conflicted with their regional like Olympics or whatever.
Yep.
So Saigon Buffalo will still be at Worlds though as a number 2 seed. They're in the playing stage. I wrote main stage on the thing, but that's incorrect. They're in the playing stage. Over in the PCS, I don't even remember if I mentioned this on one of our episodes in Quick News back in the day, but PSG Talon actually is not going to Worlds. They lost out to Beyond Gaming quite early on in the PCS playoff bracket. So PSG Talon, they've kind of been a staple at international events for the PCS for the last 2 years now, not actually going to Worlds. The number 1 seed is none other than the CTBC Flying Oyster. Oh
What a
yeah,
name.
that's a mouthful of a team name.
Beast.
They have some former Hong Kong Attitude players on that team. Hong Kong Attitude was a team that went to Worlds in 2017 and 2018 from the
Okay.
LMS/PCS. They were in C9's group at Season 9 Worlds, and they were with
Okay.
Griffin and G2. So they're an
And what
all
about
right
the
team.
play-ins?
Uh, oh yeah, playing BYG, Beyond Gaming. They were at Worlds last year. Obviously pretty infamous for their fucking shit show of an org, which was like Awan or whatever his name was like leaking their scrim results and
Oh man, I forgot about that.
yeah, so they're in the playing stage. And then to talk about our wildcard regions, Detonation Focus Me, they're back at Worlds, LGL representative. Chiefs Esports from the LCO, which is, I know, they're a pretty long time Oceanic org. Isurus, we already talked about from ALLA. Loud from the CB and the last world spot will be filled in from the TCL. Their finals are on September the 10th. That's the same day that the LEC and LCS playoffs finals weekend will be beginning. So, Worlds picture is pretty much completely filled. Obviously, in NA and EU, we still have a couple more matches to play just to determine the seeding, but it's looking like a really strong World Championship. I think all of the representatives out of the LPL and the LCK are probably at the very least better than all the rest of the LCS and LEC teams. I think the 2 teams that we maybe have potential to overtake them is, I mean, G2, they're looking really good. I think they're probably the favorite to finish in first for the LEC. They probably can contend with some of those top LPL and LCK teams. Cloud9, they've always been good performers at Worlds, but the competition this year is just looking really, really good. I think unfortunately, we say this year after year, but North America is going to have a bit of a rude awakening with the level
They've
of
got
their
their work cut out
region
for themselves.
compared to the rest of the world.
Would you say, just not looking at the other regions, but just looking at our 3 teams,
Yeah,
do
our
you
3
think
teams are
our
good.
3 teams this year are better than last year? Not thinking of the because we know C9 ended up going ahead of what's doing these team FPX. So forgetting that the actual outcome, but just the 3 teams going to Worlds last year versus this year. If you remember, do you have a feeling of like
Yeah,
what you
they're
felt better
better.
with
They're better for sure.
this year
Yeah,
or last year?
this year is
Yeah,
better
I
for
think this
sure.
year as well, definitely better. I agree. It just seems like their competition might also be better.
Yeah, the LPL is looking really, really strong this year.
Yeah.
All of the LPL teams, like I said, LNG, Doinbe's team with Tarzan and Ale, like they played so many games in the postseason and didn't even make Worlds this year. Like it's
Yeah. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. Let's get to quick news now.
Yep, we got some quick news. I kind of alluded to it before with the CLG segment, but contracts won most improved player. Obviously, the MVP will be revealed during the finals weekend at some point. I think it's pretty safe to assume that that's going to be Inspired. Everyone's been saying that for the last month now, so I don't expect there to be anything different. Next up, Kumo was released from FlyQuest. He obviously dropped down to Academy after they promoted Philip at the beginning of the summer split.
Yep.
Kumo didn't necessarily have the greatest of stays in FlyQuest in terms of his performance. He had a pretty good start to his tenure on FlyQuest, but kind of over the year of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, kind of became a bit of a liability, and that's obviously why they went with Philip for the summer split. I expect him to probably float around the academy scene once again. Maybe he can be that sort of Dokla kind of guy who clearly has some potential, but also has some clear weaknesses that he needs to fix. Next up, the World's Group Draw Show is announced. It's going to be on September 11th, directly after the LCS Finals, mainly because the LCS is the last major league to finish. They did the same thing for MSI last year and Worlds the year before.
Hmm.
But one little interesting thing, since there's going to be no LCL representative, which is the Russian league, and if people can recall, Europe was granted an additional fourth seed, there's actually
Hmm.
the possibility that we might have to make some changes to the main stage rules for the group draw.
Yeah.
Because if you've been watching League for a long time, you know the rules of Worlds. You cannot have two of the same team from the same region in the same Worlds group. It's always, just to keep it simplistic, there's 4 teams, 4 groups. There's one NA, one EU, one LPL, one LCK. Obviously, there's, PCS, VCS mixed in between, so not all NA, EU, LPL. But just to keep it simple, since now there's 4 EU, 4 LPL, and 4 LCK, there is the possibility that with the way that the plans are structured, with 2 EU teams potentially being able to make it out of the group, there's some tomfoolery that can go on, and which could invalidate the traditional rules of the group draw. So,
Have they figured out what they're going to do about that yet, or are we still waiting? Like they got to figure something out, and we're still waiting on what they're going to do.
nah, they'll figure it out last minute like they've been doing for the last 2 years, despite them constantly getting these problems with their group draws because regions can't attend Worlds. Oh my God, I've
Yeah.
been saying this for 2 years now. Get your shit together, whatever.
Okay.
Next up, Riot announced a few days ago that they're going to add an official women's LoL esports circuit, and that was reportedly led by G2, who also just recently signed an all-female league team. Brought back to the Sirens days.
Do we know how, like, is it going to be a global thing? Like, is there going to be
I don't
like
know.
one representative from each region? Like, the EU one is G2, or will Fnatic have a team? Do we know anything about that?
No, I no. I
Okay, so we'll
presume
have to wait and
it'll
see.
it'll it'll happen next year.
Because the way I could see it working out is not for there to be individual leagues. I think there's already enough issue, like for the LCS, for example, there's enough issue of getting viewers for that. I think you would have a real tough time getting enough viewers for like a league in Europe, a league in LCS, or in NA, a league. So my guess is that they would kind of do like a world sort of thing, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what they do there.
I wonder if they're going to do something similar to what they did with the Valorant scene at the beginning, to where Riot
What did
kind of
they do?
said, well, Riot just kind of said, we're going to let other people run the show at the beginning, and then we're going to sort of take over from there. Because if you
Hmm.
remember, when Valorant first came out, the first year of competitive, none of it was run by Riot. That was before they came out with like the Champions, Masters. I can't attest to this as well. Some other people can because I'm not a huge Valorant guy, but if my
Gotcha.
memory serves me correct, Riot did not actually, like, they sponsored events and whatnot, but they didn't actually run or control any of the early events. And I would expect that that's something that they might do, sort of maybe let the scene build up a little bit itself and then
Okay.
pump their Riot juices into it.
All right.
Uh,
What else we got?
Last up, we have T1. While they may be at Worlds, they're still making some headlines. No trucks this time, however. Their head coach, Polt, has been moved to the general manager role, whereas their assistant coach, Bengi, former player, obviously everybody knows who Bengi is, has now been labeled as the interim head coach, with one of their academy coaches, Sky, being moved up to be the new assistant coach. So, little organizational restructure going on here. Don't know what that implies for Worlds 2022. I did read the announcement that Joe, the T1 of CEO, released, and he said that this change was going to be made regardless of their LCK
Of
finals
their results?
performance.
Okay.
If you don't know, T1 got 3-0'd by Gen G in the finals. I find that statement a little bit hard to believe that they would have made the changes regardless, because if you went out and just beat the favorite in the LCK finals, why the hell would you change anything? So I don't really buy that statement,
I
but
don't know because, like, for example, EG made some changes where like Peter Dunn was the head coach, and then he ended up being like head of
yeah, but that
coaches or
was that was
something.
that was in the off season. Like, you wouldn't do that in the middle of the season if you're winning.
Well, I guess in between spring and summer, right?
Yeah, that's still, an off season.
Well, then isn't it technically off season now then? If
No,
it's in between summer and worlds, like it's off
no,
season.
because people aren't changing
I
like
don't know. I look
rosters
at
and
that
coaching
if in
staffs.
between spring and summer is off season, in between summer and worlds is off season in my mind. Now, I don't really
No,
think
but
either one of
but
them is off
rosters are
season, but
locked, so you can't change your roster or anything like that.
gotcha. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. For me, it's
And you have to submit
not.
your lists of like who's going to Worlds, and They have to
Yeah,
approve it and shit like that. So I don't know. Maybe I kind of see.
it's whatever to me, but yeah, it is interesting regardless.
And
Is that
that's
it?
it.
Okay. A little bit of a long episode. We actually had some recording issues. I don't know if people are even going to catch on to that, but we got through it eventually. I think we're back to normal next week, right, J&T?
Yes, we are.
We will be on new internet though, and while we think the
Well, not
internet's going to
next
be
week.
good,
Not next week, but the subsequent week.
oh, okay. J&T. Okay, I'm sorry,
I'm
guys.
all over the
J&T has told me like 18 times when he's going to be where and at what times, and I still can't get it right. Um, we think things will be back to normal next week. I don't know. We didn't even go live this week because we couldn't, obviously. But thank you so much, guys, for sticking with us. We appreciate so much. We do get a lot of new viewers, and we're hearing from a lot of you guys. Much, much appreciated. Last reminder to subscribe and hit the like button. It helps us tremendously, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Really goes a long way. And enjoy finals, guys. The playoffs have been so good. I have no reason to believe they'll be any different. So enjoy that. And for the people that go to Chicago, hope you guys enjoy the finals. Not going to be able to make that this time, but we hope that the people going there will have a good time. Our buddy Andrew's going, Tommy, they're going. So hope people enjoy that. And we'll see you guys next time for our 100th episode next week. 100th episode.
The big
Unreal.
100.
Time flies.
Yeah.
But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next week. This has been episode 99 of the Clown Fiesta podcast.